Sword of Coming Chapter 858. This chapter does not count as the 7th update, there is another chapter update on the 7th. After the first half of the fairy Hairan city was shot out with a slap, thousands of streamers lighted up at the same time, and those were the monks who had escaped from the fairy Hairan city by Yufeng. Zhou Xian glanced at this celestial and ethereal scene, which was colorful and magnificent, but it was a pity that the trees fell down and scattered. From now on, the wilderness will no longer have the highest city. Working hard to gather the sand into a mountain, once the water disperses, the wind is always blown away by the rain. But today the fairy hairpin city was abruptly interrupted and then hammered by a young hidden official as a pure martial artist. Zhou Xian closed his gaze and reminded, "We are almost ready to stop. Too much involvement here will prevent the sword from being released." Qin Pingon bears the real name of the Great Demon, and the Great Wall of Hedao Jianqi was defeated by the Great Tao of Wild World. In fact, Lu Chen's long journey was not easy. He needed to help Qin Pingon continue to evolve the Taoism and resolve the illusory and ubiquitous victory. Otherwise, there are 3 Benue talisman handy. After all, it is different from the Sanshan talisman. The Benue talisman was created by Lu Chen. The 3 swordsmen had nothing to do in the Qingming world. If you feel bored in Bai Yujing, you will be alone. The wind is too empty. Drinking in the moonlight. Different from the barbaric world, the moons in the other worlds are all forbidden places without suspense. Even if the monk's realm is enough to support a long journey, he can rise to the moon, and they are all first-class forbidden. Just talk about the Qingming world. There was a great monk who tried to travel the ruins of the ancient moon palace illegally. However, Yudo was aware of it in Bai Yujing and he fell into the world with a sword and went directly from the ascent to Yupu. Returning to the sect, borrowing wine in the bright moon of your family's blessed land to seduce your sorrows, threatening that your second child has the ability to take care of it. I drink in your own place and you will take charge of heaven and earth again. But Yudozhin handed out another sword. And then cut the blessed land and Mingyue into 2. By the end of the hundreds of Taoist officials, no one dared to beat the heavenly drum and call for grievances, turning it into a joke. Qin Pingan's Taoist Faxiang finally stopped, and glanced at the traces of the monks fleeing in the sky. It seems that there is no figure of the deputy city lord Yinlu, and that half of the city cannot detect the breath of this monster. Can you find it? Lu Chen smiled and said, "It is estimated that I hid it with some secret method. I ask for wealth and danger. Immortal Hairpin City Avenue has already taken root here. As long as you don't destroy that branch of Dao Hairpin, this one can immediately make up for the lack of city lord. The silver deer Immortal still has a chance to rise again. With its cultivating aptitude, it is not an extravagant hope to find an ascendant realm. Of course, it is an empty ascended realm. It is not much better than its master and it loses wildly. The face of the demon. No wonder Xuanpu has not dared to appear in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. When we go to the half of the city, the poor will know how to do arithmetic and maybe we can find clues." Speaking of this, Lu Chen rarely showed a somewhat solemn look. Tolerant said a word, "Don't think about interrupting that hairpin. The owner of this thing has a great merit in our world. According to the old yellow calendar, it belongs to the merits of the Tao, the deeds in the world and the satisfaction of deeds. So we had better not provoke them." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Then click to stop, don't waste time here." Lu Xian said with emotion, "It is one thing to break Xiandan City with double fists. It is obviously even more feat from the perspective of Pang Dao to let the monks of Xianyan City tear down the Ancestor Hall. Putting away the 8,000-foot-tall Taoist's facial features and the same height as ordinary people, Qin Pingon once again turned into the appearance of the Taoist crown and green robe, looked up at the more pleasing Xinjiang City, and smiled. "It's just a knowledge. That's why. The reason is very simple. It is like a family of people who like to be kind and benevolent. It is difficult to understand why some rich and noble families sitting on Jinshan Yinshan are more stingy than themselves, and why good money is hard to give up. In fact, they can't break the line. Some of the money entered the house by the side, how can you expect it to go out of the front door? Just like a mundane master, it is difficult to do it, but it is difficult for a person to ask for hard work without asking for a reason. It is also difficult for a cultivator to really ask for the cause and not for the result." Lu Xian felt a little moved, put his fingers together, drew straight down and drew a vertical line. Next to the line he drew a cicada like a cicada stopping a tree. A paper cicada, as if it was screaming in the autumn wind, know it. Lu Chen raised his hands again, drew a picture frame with his fingers and put the picture in his sleeve. It's a worthwhile trip. Lu Chen stretched his palm over his forehead, looked around and asked, Ning Yao and the others haven't rushed here yet, what do you say? Go and find out what Yinla's greetings? Anyway, this place is the last mountain city. There is no time limit to stay, only for a stick of incense. When the three of Ning Yao come here to meet, then Lu Chen can give the last three mountain symbols the three mountain cities they are Jiuquan sect. The Wooding River in the waters of the Luluo River, Tuyue Mountain. If not in a hurry to rush to Tuyue Mountain, Qin Pingon really doesn't mind staying in place, waiting for the rabbit on the side of Xiandan City. If you add the criminal officer Haosu, you will be a 14th realm, 3 ascendant sword repairmen, and a fairyland sword repairer whose killing power can be regarded as the ascendant realm. What's more, the top combat power in a wild world is most likely already in the battlefield where Liang and his brother are left. Who will rush to help? If he didn't dare to come, Qin Pingon would want to lend some courage to the old and new throne demon. Lu Xian smiled and said, This fairy silver deer is a must for his possessions and hidden traces. The half of the fairy hairpin city in front of you has not left you with any valuables. In fact, this is cleverness against being mistaken by cleverness, which is very unwise. Moreover, at this moment, inside and outside of the fairy hairpin city, it is not only the young hermit who wants the life of the silver deer. Qin Pingon said in a deep voice, The blessed land, if you can take it away, if you can't take it away, even if you dig the ground 3 feet, even if I completely smash the fairy hairpin city, I will find it. Lu Xian smiled bitterly. Me? Not us yet. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Even if it's interest dividends from a partnership business, there is no credit and hard work in the way of Master Lu's teaching. If I can only go in and out, I won't be able to stand it anymore. Lu Xian's eyes lit up. I really want to succeed. I will not take it to the Qingming world. I will give it to the Confucian temple in exchange for 3 chances to visit the half of the fairy hairpin city hundreds of miles away, like a monk's corpse. But in an instant the damaged high city, which was shaped like a mountain range, stood up to the sky again, trying to swoop back to the original place and rejoin the lower half. Was only stepped on by Qin Pingon and fell back to the ground in an instant, with the 14 realms of Taoism, forcibly suppressing the natal traction of that Taoist hairpin. At the same time, Qin Pingon, dressed as a Taoist, raised his hand and drew a talisman above the fairy hairpin city in front of him. In fact, he just wrote the word mountain. And Qin Pingon, the green shirt in the other place, turned on the watermark of the natal thing, painted a talisman with his finger volley, and then wrote a water talisman. The mountains and rivers depend on each other, but they are different after all. Qingshan Qin Pingon took a trip to the alchemy room built on the top of the mountain by Xuanpu, and used the magical powers in his sleeve. Not to mention the 3 alchemy furnaces, hundreds of bottles and cans on the shelf were put in the sleeves. Then I put away the wooden frame on which the immortality was stored, and found that the wood had a very good texture. It was a kind of unknown wood from the Immortal family. I removed the beams and pillars of the houses that hugged the wood and collected them together. Finally, I found that the ground was as luster. The gold brick seemed to be a bit particular. I squatted down and pried open a brick, and found that every base was engraved with the year number, the supervisor and the name of the craftsman. Only one shook his sleeve and put all the more than 2,000 gold bricks into the sleeve. In the end, Qin Pingon looked at the big house of the 4-walled apprentice. There was nothing. He originally planned to do good things to the end, but he thought about it again and felt that he should stay alive. Qin Pingon, who is back with a sword in a blue shirt, returns to the Patriarch Hall. In fact, it can be called a ruin. The founder of Xianyan City, it seems that he didn't give himself a road number, but had only one name which belonged to Lingxiang. She is the woman monk painted in the middle of the hanging statue, and she is the second master of that ancient Taoist hairpin. The supreme master of the immortal Yinlu, Dao No. Qianggu, was the old ghost woman who acted decisively at the wrong time. She gave up a handful of extremely high-ranking treasure whisk to disperse all the golden sesame oil. On her dark return journey, a very eye-catching golden avenue was paved. In fact, in order to protect herself at the time, she also pitted a handful of direct disciples. It was the burly old man with the name Wui. Qiong'o wanted to ensure that Ten the Four Realms great monk didn't try her best to target herself. When she grabbed the scroll from Taishu, she also blocked a control technique of her disciple Wui, which made the latter fail to follow suit. Wu Wei is standing at the border of the ruins of the Patriarch Hall. The old monk wears a black robe with a halberd hair and beard. He holds 2 scrolls in his hand. Of course, the hanging image has been destroyed, otherwise the handle will fall into the hands of the green shirt guest. I really don't think I have any good fruits. Since the opponent was able to throw it here before, he naturally has the confidence to get it back. The wild great demon style of acting in many cases is such as straightforward. As long as you want to decide something, there will be no twists and turns. Therefore, Wuqi was not at all ambiguous, and within less than half of the incense he killed the beloved disciple Xuanpu, who had taken the fairy hairpin city from his own hand. Indeed, Xuanpu, this fellow is not good at fighting when he is young. Taking advantage of the fact that Wudi could stay in the sun for a while after completing the Xuanpu, he had already released a share of God's sense. He wanted to find out the Xuanpus progeny more than the unidentified Qingshan guest. One of the city masters of Xinjiang city. Only the city lord of the past dynasties passed the truth down to the successor, and the matter is not secret. There are different ways to go back and forth between yin and yang with many rules. Although the picture scroll has been destroyed, but to be careful, Wu Tai still plans to kill the disciple again and remove the roots. The Taoist lineage of Xinjiang city, how the incense is inherited, is no more precious than your own Dao life. One of the avatars of Wutong just now grabbed a cultivator of Xian's Hanqing genealogy, and after asking the silver deer's identity and road number, he twisted the grandson of the Golden Core realm and broke his neck with one bite. The demon pill, these things that are hard to redeem have ruined their ancestors, and only one death once in 100 are considered lucky. Wui has many methods to make a monk better than death. The problem is that the city of Xiandan has changed a lot now, and Wudi is actually unable to find the hiding place of the disciple again. Qin Pingon asked with a smile, "Is it looking for the silver deer without leaving any future troubles? So that the future city lord will repaint the portrait and once again worship the incense and bring the truth to the patriarch's arrival in the sun?" Wu Wei glanced at the long sword that had never been sheathed and sneered, "A trash disciple who only lays on the belly of a lady and sprinkles wild. What do I worry about? I only worry that you will be waiting by the side." Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "If you worry too much, I will leave Xiandan city soon." Xiandan city? There is still a fart fairy town. Wu Qi chuckled, "It's none of my anyway." Banqing posted a mountain talisman, causing Gaoqing to sink continuously, bordering the roots of the mountain, and here after a water talisman was cast, there were signs of heavy snow. I believe it will soon usher in a heavy snowfall. Once that branch of the hairpin was too much immersed in the landscape and luck. The monks of later generations wanted to forcibly strip off the 2 talismans of the landscape that had been united in form and spirit, just like the skinning cramps of the ordinary master and the separation of the souls of the monks. Unless the 14th level monk who is proficient in Fulu Taoism really leaves immediately, and then another great monk of the same realm rushes over immediately, he does not hesitate to spend his own way and help Immortal Hairpin City pull its cocoons, and then it is possible to recover roughly. But it must be an idiot dreaming. Is it possible that there are many 14th realm great monks in this world? The old monk looked back at the place where the female portrait of the founder of the mountain was hung up in the past. It was a bit sad. I didn't have a good impression of the master Qiong'o. She did such a deed. Not only was Wu Wei not surprised, but she was not even angry, except that she had a very different impression of the female ancestor returning to Lingxiang. Rao is such an ambitious big demon like Wu Tai. Even if he was accustomed to tyrannical behaviors in his lifetime, thinking of this patriarch's family business, he would be defeated in the hands of this gang of rubbish. He would feel sad. In this life, Wu Tai, apart from the ancestor Gui Lingxiang, had never met a second monk who was so uncontested in the world. Back then, when she was still alive, Wuqi was just a young monk who had just set foot in the practice. On the day when Wuqi was successful in refining, the master didn't take it seriously at all. But his expression was cold and he lost his face to the kneeling disciple. A spiritual weapon, the female ancestor made a special trip to find him. She bowed her head and narrowed her eyes with a smile, patted the boy's head with a warm expression. Wrote only 3 words, "It's a human being." The green shirt swordsman and the Taoist law overlap as one. Qin Pingon became a back sword wearing a lotus crown and a green gauze robe again. Lu Shin tutade, "These mountain monks in the barren world are really cruel when they are cruel. They are amazed and ashamed." The fairy family on the mountain, please let the gods come down to the truth. Each has its own mystery. The Lu family's children have been in the family ancestral hall year after year, respecting incense for thousands of years, but they can invite Lu Xian every time. Therefore, the Lu family of the Yinyang family in the Middle-earth has always had grievances against him, the ancestor who never protected the family. I should really take the group of disciples and grandchildren to take a good look, and show me such an old ancestor complain about something and burn the incense. Qin Pingon reminded, find the silver deer. Lu Xian sat cross-legged in the lotus dojo, counting his fingers, smiling and saying, I'm looking for it, wait a moment and later we can scare Senior Wuxia. Qin Pingon then reached out and grabbed the tail that fell on the ground. The two-character worm and bird seal, Whisker, is a bit similar to the name of the previous mountain named Xianxia. The wooden handle presents a simple crimson purple, with a small gold ring to embellish the whisk. As for the whisk, the silk thread is white, extremely slender and the material is unknown. Qin Pingon reached out and held a handful of silk thread in his hand, which was about 3,600. This thing has followed Qiong'o for many years in the land of Yin and Underworld, but it does not get a trace of Yin and evil aura. Is the old woman still failing to refine this demon into a life thing? Lu Qian smiled and said, that old woman is a mosquito. How did she refine this whisk? But it was a fantastic idea to be used by the old woman to stand by her side. No wonder she could avoid the sight of ghosts for thousands of years. Lu Xian sighed, ancient Yaoguang, the one who supplies everything. Returning to Lingxiang has the heart, but it is a pity that she has such a prodigal. The founder of Xianyaking returned to Lingxiang. She has excellent cultivating aptitude, but she has no ambitions. She seems to practice for a lifetime just to make a fairy tale city closer to the sky. It was the second generation of the city lord, that is, the old woman Qianggu, who retreated to the land of darkness when the opportunity was not good, and only then began to have a relationship with the wild sects including Tuo Yueshan. But Qiong'o still obeyed his master's orders, and did not move the ancestral blessed land with a falling star. The fairy hairpin city was passed to the hands of Wuqi, and then he began to seek change. Of course, it was more of Wuqi's selfishness. In order to benefit his own practice, he broke the bottleneck of the fairyland faster, began to forge weapons, sold them to the sect on the mountain and made money. When Xuanpu took over Xinjiang city, it was quite different. A blessed land named Yaoguang by the patriarch returned to Lingxiang was excavated and managed to the greatest extent, and began to do business with major dynasties. Pu likes to sell magic weapons to two dynasties that are not far apart at the same time, but Xianxia's transcendent status in the wild world is indeed promoted by Xianpu. Uchi finally asked the most curious question, are you? The last time he showed up, Wudi still teamed up with Master Qianggu to deal with the domineering ancestor who moved the mountain, and even begged for more money so that Xiandan city escaped. So Wu Tai is not at all aware of the current situation in the wild world. Qin Pingon smiled and said, the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi. No wonder. Wu Qi nodded, then you can beat Xiao Xian more than before. This ascending realm ghost quickly added, but Xiao Yan was not very young at that time. Qin Pingon smiled. Wu Tai couldn't help asking, how long have you been practicing? I said that you don't look like a true Taoist priest. Since you are a native swordsman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, there must be no such monk who speaks no words and lives. Rule. Qin Pingon said, less than 1,000 years old. Uchi was amazed and gave a thumbs up to the younger cultivator and said sincerely, Wizard of Heaven. The wild world does not recognize anything, only recognizes a realm. Qin Pingon said, just over 40 years old. Wu Chao was stunned, then waved his hand, you have to have a degree when you tell jokes. In the extremely dry, lonely and gloomy land that day, it is difficult to find a big living person to chat. Besides, any ghost dangling over there, no matter how high or low it is, never want to meet a Yangjian, a human monk who can swim through the underworld, who dares to provoke. It is really harder than a ghost. Wuqi still couldn't find the silver deer, so he had to admit his fate, begging that the disciple didn't know the method of the Zhuxiatang's reduction of truth. Otherwise, don't look at this moment and talk with the hidden official in front of you. It seems to be very friendly and wealthy, but Wuqi, I can guarantee that as long as the opposing party catches the opportunity, the two sides will reunite immediately, and it will inevitably be a fight for life. The old monk glanced at the north direction. By the way, one last question, what happened to Dong San? Golden pill when you come, soaring when you go. This is a unique feat in the 10,000-year history of the Great Wall of Jianqi. A sword repairman in the Golden Core realm took the wild world as a place for sword refining. In the end, he not only returned to the Great Wall of Sword Qi alive, but the key was that when Dong Senging returned to his hometown, he also brought the head of an ascending realm great demon. Qin Pingon pointed to the sky curtain. Don't you think something is missing? Wu Yen glanced at the sky, only to realize that there were only 2 bright moons. Fuck, it is indeed something Dong Sanjian has done. In the ruins of the Patriarch's Hall behind Wu Qi, is the true body of the ascended realm monk Xuanpu, which is actually a scarlet black snake. There is no record of this incident on the Summer Palace, but Bai Yujing's third head teacher has a wide range of knowledge, and he said that he broke the secrets and solved the confusion for Qin Pingon. The ancient mysterious snake, which is like a long rope, hangs in the sky and the avenue is far away. Lead the ground. Recommendation: the reading app I'm using recently. App. There are many sources of books, all books and fast updates. So this senior Xuanpu and the inheritance of the incense of the fairy hairpin city are naturally in harmony with the Great Road. When this city owner, it is my duty. Xuanpu really made the fairy hairpin city a place of scenic victory. This Dao No, obtained appropriately, is much better than Yi Pu's imaginary single step. I never thought that Xuanpu is still a genuine product. Qin Pingon asked heartily, is Xuanpu's real body shorter? Although it is entrenched in the ruins of the Patriarch Hall, in fact it is no more than 1,000 feet long. According to the agreement, Qin Pingon will hand it over to the criminal Haosu for any big monster in the wild world. Lu Qin smiled and said, Jing Yuan has been lost and I was fed by Wu Chao and this real body skin is left. It is nameless and resembling a snake. However, Wu Chao is still interesting and has not breached the contract. I promised you to leave a soaring realm demon pill. Qin Pingon was quite puzzled. He waved his sleeve and put the mysterious snake into his bag. He couldn't help but ask, Wu Krai's harvest on the Yangjian side can still feed back the underworld? It's an illusion and there is no way to go. Yes. Is it possible for Wutong to not be restricted by the rules of the roads of Yumanjilu? Lu Shen smiled and said, the sky is infinite, and there are always winding paths leading to secluded places. Qin Pingon saw that Wu Kai's figure had been erratic and showed signs of disappearing and suddenly asked, as a ghost on the path of the netherworld, have you ever heard of a monk named Zhong Kue? Wukua's heartstrings are tense, and an old ghost in the ascending realm has failed to hide that little change in expression. Can be seen that the name Zhong Kue has not only heard of it, but it must be remembered deeply by Wudi. Wu Qi was too lazy to remedy or cover up, curled his lips and said straightforwardly, this name is like thunder in our land. Qin Pingon smiled and said, have you never dealt with Zhong Kue? Wu Qi sneered, if I have dealt with, can I still chat with the hermit? From beginning to end, Wu Qi never mentioned the word Zhong Kue. According to Lu Qin, an earth immortal is half of the heavens and the earth, refining the form and living in the world and can live forever. The ghost cultivation is called the ghost immortal, which is much inferior. It is the outside body of the sun god, and only the Yin, the ghost of the Qingling spirit, still belongs to the uncertified avenue, so the idol is unknown. The 3 mountains are nameless. Although they do not reincarnate, it is difficult to enter the green status, wandering indefinitely and finally having no return. Especially the ghosts who choose to stay on the path of the underworld are regarded as rebellious, and they are the first targets of the ghost judges to patrol the territory of the underworld. Qin Pingon knew all these things before, but Lu Qin called him an obsessive generation, which sounded weird. Lu Qin sold a pass without clearly explaining the origin of the Dao. He only said that Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, whom we burned incense to pay homage, had little appearance. Otherwise the ghosts and immortals would slightly offend the sky and one would be cut off. But Sanshan Jiuho has long been in a place of cultivating, and a monument has been erected to announce that the world is peaceful and stubborn. Before Y's figure dissipated, I hope that both parties will not meet again in the future. Qin Pingon held the whisk, shook it and said with a smile, follow fate. Wait until the woozy completely dissipated. Lu Qin lay on the lotus petals, staring at Qin Ping's hand in a daze and said, poor Dao can buy this thing with a lot of money. Qin Ping put the dust into his sleeve. It's easy to say, as long as the price is right you can talk. Lucian heard this and turned over, lying in the dojo with Erlang's legs raised. Then there was no more talk. Qin Pingon reminded, "Don't forget the new lord of the city." Lucian said, "Here comes." The fairy silver deer, from a mysterious landscape as if being dragged out by someone, fell severely on the side of the Zhuxiang site. Inlu saw the Daoist man with sleeves in both hands, smiled and said, "Come on, continue to open the door to welcome guests." The first mountain city of the Sanshan talisman on the side of the Moor dynasty, Lu Ji heard that he could stay here for a stick of incense, and his eyes flashed, staring at the jade version that had lost a sword formation. City. Lu Ji holds 2 swords, Nanming and Easy Blade, sword intent is Taoism, and 2 visions are manifested respectively. Lu Ji is standing in the middle of the big water of Tianqi and a big blue fish swims in the sky. Then old by law I am responsible for killing people with swords. While you are blocking the road you are looking for money. We will each account for 40% and Qin Pingon will leave 20%. Qi Tingji smiled and nodded. When did become the old rules? Just waited until the 2 of them entered the city with their swords all the way, unimpeded, and even a large formation of the city was not opened, which really surprised Qi Tingji. Isn't there a Yi waterfall that has just entered the Ascension realm here? It seems that there is still a woman who is the end of the world. Lu Ji said, "Will Qin Pingon just leave us some leftovers?" Qi Tingji smiled and said, "I don't want to come too far. In fact, Yi waterfall has long been away from the Jade City with a white blade. He is close enough to carry the treasures. In short, it is easy to carry the heavy treasures. They are all swept away and fled in a hurry." The mountain city located between Yuban City and Xiandan City is a place called Chunjian Mountain. Here the spring mountains are verdant and the spring water flows long. There is a fairy family saying that peaches and plums marry the spring breeze. Ning Yao stayed here for a long time, walking all the way as if determined to use up a stick of incense, similar to the previous Dua Qingshan. As long as she did not come to provoke her, she just came here to visit the scenery, and finally Ning Yao was in a stream. Stopping by the bank, I saw a Buddhist language on the inscription, and I faced my head with a white blade as if cutting a spring breeze. Ning Yao was stunned for a long time, turned his head back, saw Qi Tingji and Lu Ji, and found that Lu Ji seemed to be in a good mood. It was rare to have a smiling face. Ning Yao just waited for the 2 to respect the incense, and went to the fairy tale city together. Appearing in the boundary of Xiandan City, Qi Tingji stretched out his fingers and rubbed his eyebrows. "I know that it will be the result until I see it with my own eyes, or..." Lu Ji nodded and said, "Sure enough, the act of picking up money is not enough for the 2 of us together. We really just missed it." When they rushed to the site of the Patriarch Hall of Xiandan City, Qin Pingon had already dealt with the fairy silver deer, who had just become the city lord and got the blessed land of Yaoguang. Handed to Ning Yao and the others the last copy of the 3 mountain talisman, Qin Pingon smiled. "I might be lazy and find a place to drink a little wine at Jiuquan sect. You can go to Wuding first after you finish your work here. Wait for me over there." Ning Yao nodded and took the lead in holding Fu Yuanyu. As early as on the Jianqi Great Wall, she developed the habit of letting Qin Pingon drink alone. Lu Ji asked, "Is there any leakage to pick up here?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Of course, although there is no time limit, you still strive to leave within a stick of incense." Qi Tingji said, "Lu Ji, shall we act separately?" Lu Ji said, "You are at a high level, run a long way and go to that half of the fairy city. Qi Tingji's sword and rainbow are instantly there." Qin Pingon joked, "Yes, so familiar?" Lu Ji grinned, "Bending over to pick up money is something like a fool." 3 copies of the 3 mountain talisman, almost equivalent to traveling half a wild world. White Flower City, ruins of ancient battlefields, Dua Qingshan. Yuban City of Yunwen Dynasty, Chunjian Mountain, Xiandan City. Jiquanzong, Wuding, Tuashan. It seems that Qin Pingon is deliberately or unintentionally letting a heartstring relax and have a degree. Every 3 mountain talisman will have a mountain market. It is just to relax and take a look at the scenery. In the vicinity of Zhongshan City in Jiuquan, Ning Yao Jingxiang will continue to travel far away with amulets. Qin Pingon raised his eyes and looked over and found a big city built near Zhongshan Gate in Jiuquan. It was 1,000 miles away from the mountains and rivers, but it seemed that he could smell the wine over there at this moment. Qin Pingon habitually squatted down, twirled the soil lightly and said with a smile, "Aoyang said that there is also a chivalrousness in the wild world, and among the monks of the demon race, there are also heroes who are more human than people. He also specifically mentioned this to me. He said that as long as there is a chance to travel the wild hinterland in the future, he must come here for a drink. Lu Xian smiled and said, "There is no small matter in the world. The heaven and the earth are true spirits. Who dares to be contemptuous? The so-called mountain people are just chicken dogs. People come here and don't bark or beat them away." After, Qin Pingon concealed himself and stepped out of 1,000 miles of ground, and arrived at the city under the eyelids of Zhou sect. He randomly picked a wine shop in an alley and his business was excellent. However, the Zhou sect monk is notoriously not fond of fighting. Besides, it is true that he can't do other monks in fighting. The Lord is an old fairyland who has been unable to break through the border. In the city there are a lot of monster monks. Qin Pingon is not a stranger, and he also used a blindfold method to deliberately hide the Longsword Knight tour and the Daoist crown. Qin Pingon and the wine shop's shopkeeper ordered 3 jars of signature wine, a few dishes of wine and vegetables, and found a table to sit alone, poured a bowl of wine, raised the white bowl, sniffed and squinted. It is indeed a good wine. The key: it is cheap and good in quality, and only 1 snowflake money can take away 3 altars. Lu Xian asked tentatively, "Can I show up for a drink?" Qin Pingon nodded. Lu Xian appeared in the wine shop with a mustard seed, no different from the young Taoist who set up a stall in Lizhu Cave. He was still very poor. Furthermore, there were several monks in a liquor store, but they were unaware of Lu Qian's sudden appearance. To be precise, it was like this young Taoist priest had already arrived at the liquor store. 2 demon cultivators who were incompletely formed wanted to join the table. Lu Qian slapped the table. "Master Dao is like the kind of person who can drink at the same table with others?" Qin Pingon was too lazy to care about this, so he asked for an extra bowl from the wine shop, poured a bowl of wine for Lu Qian and asked with a smile, "What is the saddest thing to steal?" Lu Xian sat cross-legged on the bench, raised the wine bowl with both hands, took a sip of the wine with a drunken look on his face, shaking his head and saying, "Of course it is stealing alcohol." Qin Pingon could not help but think of the past hometown affairs. The 3rd master of Bai Yujing in those years under the guise of palmistry, often beating the small-town women. The old people don't predict human affairs, but Zenonku can gradually plow. In the past there was a Lizhu cave sky with 100 flowers and rich grass spirit. Both sides have their own minds, just drink silently. Qin Pingon drank a bowl of wine and Lu Qian's bowl almost bottomed out, so he filled 2 more bowls. Lu Xian thanked him, glanced at the sky and slowly said, "Haosu is also a poor man." Qin Pingon is non-committal. Lu Xian said, "Of course poor people must have hateful things, but the most hateful things, or the hatred of all the people in the world, it seems that it is not as good as Haosu who hates himself. In this way the dead knot is truly insoluble." At that time he was a young man and was domineering. Haosu once determined to open up a real way to the sky for all sentient beings in his hometown. "I never thought that the last man was just in the prison of the Great Wall of Jianqi with the title of criminal officer, drinking alone, and the years were long, but he watched the full moon a few more times." Criminal officer Haosu, one of his natal flying swords was named Chan Wan. For thousands of miles, there is frost on the earth. In the middle blessed place in Fiaozhou in his hometown, a Jindan monk was originally the bottleneck of the avenue, but Haosu became the nascent soul in one fell swoop. So it is said that Haosu is in his hometown as long as he is willing and not eager to leave. It is not difficult for one person to fight through the world with a sword. Even in the blessed world there are all kinds of signs. There is a sky outside the world, there are people outside the world, and the young and energetic Haosu is still heroic and dry. He does his own way and considers himself a swordsman. He will definitely not lose the so-called outsiders. And Haosu took his sword soaring away from the blessed land. The reason why the movement was so loud that it attracted the coveting of many Howren immortals was precisely because Haosu's natal flying sword's natal supernatural powers were too swaggering across the market, pulling the moonlight to the world. A continent of mountains and rivers, the monks of the upper 5 realms were aware of the vision, because in the daytime an extremely bright beam of moonlight descended unexpectedly. Otherwise, the monks in the blessed land who normally fly to the awe-inspiring world, even the native monks of the superior blessed land, will not be so eye-catching. Even the local monks of the superior blessed land will not be so eye-catching, and will not be immediately pinpointed by the great monks. Where the blessed land is, This is why Haosu will quietly leave Middle-earth Divine Continent and head to the Great Wall of Sword Qi after hiding in Baiwafudi for many years. In fact, what Haosu really wants to go is the wild world, occupying 1 month of it and taking the opportunity to refine that, and the flying sword, which naturally fits with the great Tao of Tao, has never been interested in killing monsters, the most misleading criminal officer in the history of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In my mind, there is only revenge. Many times, just a careless person will teach people to drink a lifetime of sullen wine, and they will not be suffocated and can't match the word regret. Qin Pingon drank the wine and said for no reason, "A person with a moral integrity will not show his behavior." Lu Xun smiled knowingly. Tao is not in the 5 shape or physical body. This is one of the essences of the inner morality. Qin Pingon, you can and you secretly admire the knowledge of the poor Tao. What is there to hide? Qin Pingon raised the wine bowl towards Lu Qin, and Lu Qin quickly lifted his butt and touched it gently with the bowl. Afterwards, Qin Pingon slowly said, "On the long journey to Luzhou in Beiju, I would encounter some things that I didn't understand at the time. For example, some monks in the temples always felt that they were far away from the Dharma after eating fast and reciting the Buddha. Fighting for fame and fortune, spending money to buy the relationship between the government just to live in the Shidian temple, have more titles and the brothers in the same temple, but they have to die forever. I have seen it with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears. Even the local people are very disapproving of them, but they still have to burn incense. I waited until I read this sentence in the book, and then I suddenly wanted to understand a lot of things. Maybe a real practitioner, I am not talking about the kind of genealogical master, but just these practices that are really close to the world, and the magic of the fairy family. It's okay. Cultivation is really just about cultivating the mind. I can't focus on cultivating. I think, for example, if I'm an ordinary master, I often go to the temple to burn incense the 15th day of every month year after year, and then one day I met a monk on the road. His steps are gentle, his expression is calm, you can't see his dharma attainments, his knowledge is high and low, he bowed his head with you and then just passed by. Even if we meet again next time, we don't know. Once we met, he passed away, got the way and left, we will just continue to burn incense. I once took millet grains to burn incense in a temple. I felt that I was going wrong. So I asked a monk for the way. The monk said that we were on the wrong side. After helping to show the way, he turned around and walked his own way. Xiaomili still complained a bit. I didn't know how to help lead the way. I didn't say anything at that time. I just thought that if I were the guide, I might ask if I need to go with me. I thought about it later, maybe instead I don't have the so-called wisdom root of Buddhism. Lu Xun did not interrupt, he just listened to Qin Pingan's self-talk. In fact, as long as Qin Pingan does not deliberately cover up, Lu Qin can hear and see clearly his thoughts, words and emotions. For example, now Qin Pingan just drinks and doesn't speak anymore, but Lu Qin seems to have seen pictures of landscapes. There is a Xianxia temple near Uafudi Zhuangyun Lane, and there is an aged host inside. He likes to speak advanced Buddhism and only talks to others. There is a disciple who inherits the position of abbot, and a little novice who likes to be lazy but kind-hearted. There is a middle-aged master of the Baiyin view of Qinghuan country in Aquarius, loves reading so much that it hurts his eyesight. The little road boy who sweeps the courtyard is sad every day. Because of the trees in the Daoist temple, Gaoji often hangs the paper kites, and he is blocked by the children's parents and scolded. It seems that he has never really heard his peace. Lu Xun whispered, "The ancients' cloud school book is like sweeping fallen leaves, sweeping as you go." Qin Pingan unknowingly had finished drinking the drink in the bowl, glanced at Lu Qin. Lu Qin smiled and said, "I still have it, so I don't need to pour it. We cannot believe in the Buddha or believe, not burn incense or worship the Bodhisattva, but we should believe in everything that can make us feel peaceful. The Buddhist scriptures clearly tell the world that worshipping Buddha means worshipping oneself, because the heart is the Buddha. All living beings have Buddha nature. The Buddha is the enlightened man and the man is the unconscious Buddha. I understand the truth, but I just can't do it. I feel like I'm asking for something from the Buddha and Bodhisattva, making a wish." Qin Pingan stopped talking or even wandering all the way after saying this. He took a deep breath, drank the third bowl of wine in one sip, and put the remaining 2 jars of wine on the table into his sleeve. Lu Xun said, "Is this leaving?" In fact, he was really a little flustered right now. He always felt that Qin Pingan had finished saying these things in his heart, and maybe he had to do something near that wooding river in Mountain City. Qin Pingan nodded. Lu Qin blinked his eyes with a curious expression on his face and asked, Why don't you try to drag the bright moon to the Hauran world, or simply the colorful world? This is called fat water not flowing into the field of outsiders. Why do you want this? It's a great thing, let us give it to us for nothing? Qin Pingon glanced at him. Master Lu asked clearly, it's boring and the money for drinks will be counted back to me. If you can successfully drag the bright moon for a round, you can lose a piece of luck in the wild world. You can find a place to cultivate Taoism for Haosu. Lu Qin was originally the person who led Haosu to the Qingming world. At the same time, Qin Pingon and Taoist ancestors are also regarded as paying back gifts. As for Qingming Tianxia and Bai Yujing, Qin Pingon does not care about how to arrange this round of the bright moon that has emerged out of thin air. At the same time, in the future, traveling far away in the Qingming world with this merit, even if it carries the real name of the great demon, it is believed that it will reduce the victory of the great road in the dark. Can also make Qingming world disrupt the time of the wild world. Kills 5 birds with 1 stone. Don't look at the third master of Bai Yujing, his eyes were murmured and complained all the way as if he was being led by the nose by Qin Pingon, but the third master of Bai Yujing was the real expert in business. Lu returned to the Lotus Dojo. Qin Pingon once again traveled far away with Amulet. Perhaps the relationship between the road and water. Qin Pingon felt a wave of water transport on his face. The Wooding River, which is dozens of miles wide, is just one of the hundreds of tributaries of the Luluo River. After Qin Pingon Jingxiang. Once again a Taoist figure appeared, but it was not 8,000 feet high but 9,000 feet. The figure stepped out and stepped on the indefinite river, arousing stormy waves, and the figure was 1,000 feet higher. 10,000 thick figure, standing between the sky and the earth, raising the palm of his hand, reaching out to grasp, actually directly pulled the Wooding River from the earth, and then branched into the river in the distance. In this way, Qin Pingon lifted all the more than 300 rivers and twisted them into a long water transport rope. In the end, they swept backwards and shrank the mountains and rivers for thousands of miles, so that the entire Luluo River was out of the riverbed. The water hangs in the air and is dragged away in a tug of war. Sword of Coming Chapter 859. The update is late 16,000 words. P.S. There is one more chapter tonight. Jiang Shangzhen, who was wandering around in the wild world, met a group of monks who traveled far away from the world. As for Jiang Shangzhen's emergence of the Yin God, he is helping Senior Qing's secret to overcome difficulties together. If it is an accident to meet Feng Xuetao, it is even more accidental to meet this young man halfway through. In fact, Jiang Shangzhen's intention was to go to the nearest Tingji ferry and find Jing Juzhong. But the so-called recent, it is equivalent to a continent separated by mountains and rivers. Chao Ci Fu Su Yuan Jiao Chunqing Su Bai Yi Yufu Guqin Zhao Yaoguang and a young monk who practiced closed mantra. As for the apologists of this group of people, Han Qiaosa, who had nothing to do all the way, heard the situation mentioned by Jiang Shangzhen, and immediately rushed to Tingji ferry to find a senior. One of her natal escape methods is faster than sending letters to flying swords. And this group of young people arrived at Tingji together before. Lu Yuzhou and Huaiqian stayed at Tingji ferry, and the rest continued to travel far. Lu Yuzhou, who was known as a good-for-nothing boy, just took out 2 Luxiazu as the fastest ferry boat recognized by Hauran. In Lu Yuzhou's words, what if one ferry breaks down on the road? Be prepared. I still have a Luxiazu anyway. In addition, he also gave away a few sets of warrior warp and weft armor and piles of golden talisman, just like the stupid son of the landlord's family at the foot of the mountain. At the foot of a secluded mountain, Jiang Shangzhen is giving these young people the reason why he was not busy and set off immediately was that Jiang Shangzhen was hesitant to give out the 3 mountain talisman. Previously, Cui Dongshan improved the 3 mountain talisman, but it was too late to claim credit with his husband. In addition, Jiang Shangzhen also needs to learn more about the enemy through Yinshin, and finally needs to make these young people understand a truth. If he really wants to rush to rescue Feng Xuetao, it is very risky. Looking at the 9 young people in a circle, Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, if you have any questions, please hurry up. If you don't want to go, you must say it directly. There is nothing to be embarrassed about. To be honest, I regret talking about this with you now. Chao Ci, the ultimate martial artist, the peak of return. Fu Su, the first disciple of Beta Shengzheng in the middle, with a sword-raising gourd hanging from his waist, named 3. Yuanqiu with a gentleman's jade pendant hanging from his waist. The newly appointed head of the Henku Academy is the youngest head of the academy in Haoran's history. He has compiled 3 Ijia at a young age. His name is awe-inspiring and one of the 10 young people in the world. The hometown is the Qingming world, but it has become the sub-sage. Pure, perfect in everything. She was a gas trainer and a pure martial artist except that she was not a sword repairman and she was of the same number as Chen Pingan. He made the list at the age of 16. Su Bai, like Chunqing, is a young candidate from several places in the world. The ancestral home of Zhaoling, the schoolmaster, is the Master Su, who is known as the Sage of Characters, but not the Sage of the Confucian Temple. Su Bai is now a son of a soldier, proficient in chess and nicknamed Zhou Xian. Yufu, the pinnacle of Wufu in the 9 realms, the bottleneck. Guqin Jing Zhuzhong's close disciple. Zhao Yaoguang, a handsome young Taoist priest with a peachwood sword, Huang Ziji, a man of over 100 years old. The young monk, carrying a niche covered by cotton cloth, is the portable Buddha who has been practicing closed mantra. Jiang Shangzhen feels that he is a red-lined Yuelao, who contributed to this unprecedented match made in heaven. It is very likely and there will be no one before and after. The 2 worlds in the future. If the accident is not big, these young monks and martial artists will be the group of people who can fight the most in the Haoran world and the wild world. It's like a street fight in a narrow road. Inside the young people there are Jing Juzhong, the great master of Long Hushan Pei Cup and the real person of the fire dragon. They confronted a future throne demon. In the end the 2 sides rolled up their sleeves. Of course, before they made a decision, Jiang Shangzhen repeated the danger of the trip twice. Jiang Shangzhen said something to dig his heart out and drove them to the battlefield. Jiang Shangzhen took a great risk. Any young man stayed there and could not return to his hometown. For Jiang Shangzhen, Yunku Fudi, even Yuguazong, Tongye Tontinents are all a trouble. In the unlikely event that the entire army was wiped out, Jiang Shangzhen would not have to return to the Haoran world, and he would honestly be a wild man in the wild world. Chao Xie didn't speak much and only said a word. When I arrived on the battlefield I took the lead. Fu Si didn't say a word. Of course he didn't want to go but he was too lazy to talk nonsense. Fu Su wore a snow-white robe, and as the pioneer of Baidi City, Fu Su carried too much reputation. It's not the same as Chao Xie. On the road of martial arts, Chao Xie has shown an invincible posture since he was young, but on the way of cultivating, no matter how good Fu Su is, no matter how high his education is, it is like Tuo Yushan's sword repair Liz Hen, the Taoist priest of Bai Yujing Shanqing, who would dare to say that he was riding on the mountain trail. Yu Yufu looked at the direction of the battlefield and didn't know what he was thinking about. In Jiang Shangzhen's opinion, the little girl had a very good manner and a very beautiful appearance. Chunqing was carefully reviewing her outfit to avoid the ever-changing battlefield. Her hands and feet were in a hurry. When she was forced to fight Ma Kushuan in Aquarius, she suffered a lot of losses. The means have not been implemented or the experience is lacking. The little celestial master Zhao Yaoguang, who spoke to his appetite, said directly, "The trail is just a few years late, otherwise there will be nothing wrong with Ouyang." It is Guqin the most pragmatic. He has consulted Jiang Shangzhen a lot, asked a lot of details, repeatedly deliberated and didn't care about the face. Geography of mountains and rivers around the battlefield. The ultimate goal of this trip is to save people and kill demons, or what? Is it possible to wait for the help of one's own great monk? And is it possible for the other party to let 1 or even 2 of the thrown demons secretly protect the road? Jiang Shangzhen answered one by one. Su Bai breathed a sigh of relief. In terms of fame, he is constantly getting worse in the group, but when it comes to fighting, especially fighting for life, Su Bai is really a bit embarrassed, mainly because of his relatively mild temperament. Fortunately, Guqin asked him a lot of embarrassment. Talking or something unexpected. Guqin finally smiled and said, "Sect Master Jiang, although we did not plan to rescue Feng Shuatao at the beginning of our journey this time, we are willing to be arrogant when we go out. It's like having signed the certificate of life and death before entering the ring." His teachers, sects and family all know this very well. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and nodded in greeting. In fact, Guqin didn't say it to herself but to everyone else. Guqin said coldly, "Don't hold back anyone, don't help anyone." In the history of the Great Wall of Sword Qi battlefield, there are countless lessons from the past. You should be hard and soft. Not only can you not save people but you will only harm yourself. Su Bai's affection for Guqin just now because the one who is most likely to be behind is yourself. Zhao Yaoguang laughed. No way, Pang Dao is a famous chivalrous heart. Yuan Yao glanced at Gu Kan and was surprised. In fact, the same reason can be said more smoothly and not so harshly. Yuan Yu quickly figured out the joints. Gu Kan was pursuing affirmation, negation and affirmation. Once he successfully returned to Feng Shuatao this time, Su Bei's impression of Gu Kan, the demon monk of Baidi City, would be completely finalized. The grievance in my heart not only disappeared, on the contrary, I became more grateful to Gu Kan and recognized this person sincerely. Yu Yufu said in a deep voice, Gu Kan's words are terrible and reason is such a reason. So we will all think about it during the next journey. Catching and fighting on the mountain, the sword fairy Fusu is the best. But if you say that the battlefield melee Chao Xiai Yu Yufu have been to the Great Wall of Jianqi and fought in the battlefields of Fuyazu and Jinjiazu, they are the most qualified to say a few more words. Chunqing whispered, it would be great if Qin Yingguan was here. She will feel more at ease. Although the two sides have never veiled their faces, is she in the mountain of the Prince of Nanyue, Caiji Mountain? I have seen a student of Qin Pingyan who can teach Cui Dongshan, must have a better brain and a stronger method. Gu Kan glanced at her pure green and her impression of her improved a bit. Yu's husband rubbed a seal on his palm. The side section is that the stone is in the stream, how is it not the mainstay? Qin was in the sky and the fist still went to the sky that day. 8-character seal. Woman Valkyrie next to Qin Chao. Jiang Shangzhen suddenly raised his head and said with a smile, some of the tattoos are busy and most of them don't care about us. Everyone, this is not good news, why don't you think about it again? It turned out to be an extremely exaggerated vision of heaven and earth. Just in an instant, in the daytime when the sun was shining, a moment of night appeared for no reason, as if the light of a barren world was converged into a line in an instant. Point to the ruins of the ruins. Jiang Shangzhen looked up at the sky, rubbed his eyebrows and had a headache. Qin Shan's his hometown. Don't everyone say that the girl in Tsing-yi with a ponytail has a particularly good temper? But everyone present, even if they were aware of this vision, still no one had a slight remorse and even Su Bai had firm eyes. Gu Kan's eyes are even hotter. Relatively speaking, only Chao Xiai has the most indifferent expression. Jiang Shangzhen finally laughed and clasped his fists. Jiang is fortunate to meet the kings. 9 people each and Jiang Shangzhen paid back. Bai Xian set up a table a dozen miles away from Luopa Mountain, because a pavilion was built here for people to rest. Bai Xian didn't know where he touched a purple sand handle pot and tied the dragon head. Bamboo style, arty, a big boy like an old man who is proficient in tea ceremony sitting behind the table with Erlang's legs while keeping accounts while sipping tea leisurely. Bai Xian raised his head and glanced at the outside of the pavilion. Before he saw anyone, he saw a blue sleeve. The sleeve was cracked by the master and the dragon and tiger stepped into a breeze. Qin Lingjun strode into the pavilion, immediately turned his hands down and walked slowly. Isn't this brother Bai busy? Bai Xian sat still, smiled and raised his hands and greeted Qin Lingjun with a fist. It was a courtesy of real money and silver. Most people on Bai Xian's side did not receive this treatment at all. The main reason is that Qin Ling knows a lot and can talk very well. He talked to Bai Xian about a lot of strange customs and customs in the world, and the slang of the local customs. Bai Xian should not spend money to listen to people telling stories. What gods will ask land, don't think of Lord Land as a god. Qin Ling knows all kinds of stove princes he po anyway. Qin Lingjun stretched out his hand to hold the table, his eyes rolled and smiled. Brother Bai, why don't you look for a handle pot, drink to your mouth and be more proud? Bai Xian asked, what kind of pot with a handle? Are you particular? Qin Lingjun waved his hand, no need to ask, I'll give you a few when I look back. Bai Xian is a person who doesn't like to owe favors, but now he is shy in his pocket and has no spare money. Longquan Shou is gone, so he has to say, the money is owed first. Qin Lingjun's fingers bent, he slammed the desk hard and stared at Bai Xian. What the hell? Brother Bai, do you know that talking about money between brothers at the wine table is like going over the wall in the middle of the night and touching the of a neighbor's wife? Not compliant. It's arranging. Bai Xian nodded vigorously, and there was a row of cleaned licorice roots on the table. Bai Xian used it as a broken mouth to eat, so he picked up one and handed it to Qin Lingjun. Qin Lingjun took the licorice root, chewed it in his mouth, flipped through the account book on the table casually and asked, Brother Bai, what do you remember these? They are all outsiders who clearly cannot be a disciple of Luopa Shan. Anyway, now that Pei Qian is not on the mountain, Bai Xian laughed and said, Call friends and the rivers and lakes will form an alliance. When the time comes, everyone will swarm up and beat Pei Qian. Of course I, the leader of the rivers and lakes, will do things with a sense of measure. Say yes, no dead hands are allowed to avoid hurting peace. Qin Lingjun was stunned at hearing this. Bai Xian, did his brain fool Pei Qian? Encircle Pei Qian? You are not committing evil, you are committing death? Just think about it again, maybe the old brother Bai is stupid? Bai Xian asked in a low voice. Brother Jingqing, that Guizhujiu is the little disciple of Master Hermit. Are you familiar with it? Bai Xian's idea is very simple. Since the big white goose said that Pei Qian was afraid of Guizhujiu as long as Guizhujiu was afraid of himself, even Bai Xian had won Pei Qian. As long as everyone is a sword repairer, Bai Xian will not be shocked to see anyone except Master Hermit. Qin Lingjun shook his head. I haven't seen it before. The little girl hasn't come to my side to worship the mountain. Bai Xian asked casually, go to Qilong Alley to find Taoist Jia for a drink again? Qin Lingjun had already chewed up the licorice and swallowed it altogether. He laughed and said, the women have infinite skins with different colors, but they are generally good. I learned it from the Dafeng brothers. Bai Xian could not understand it all. Qin Lingjun leaned back on the table, arms around his chest, raised his head slightly and said slowly, I have been diligently practicing the Taoism recently and I have some feelings and I will listen to you. Raise my head to 5 feet, and the fairy will take over to help me clear my talents and move across 3 continents. The more whirling, the more stable. I will drive the sky at the moment, it is true cultivation, jump the dragon gate 3 times to draw the water, the good mountains and the rain fly with me. The dragon is ever-changing, omnipotent, the world of human beings, the clouds and water are free, 5 colors sit in the middle of the xia, toss the hairpin to enjoy the blessing. Qin Lingjun waited for a long time and found that there was no reaction from the old brother Bai behind him, so he turned his head and found that this guy was busy looking up and drinking tea there. He noticed Qin Lingjun's sight. Bai Xian put down the teapot and said in doubt, did you finish? Forget it, Qin Lingjun doesn't understand it anyway, he borrowed it from the big white goose, it's really sour and silly. Qin Lingjun did not choose the bench next to him to sit on. Instead he walked around the table and sat side by side with Bai Xian. Looking at the road outside, Qin Lingjun said with emotion, my master once said that there is an old saying here in my hometown, saying that he will sit on a sedan chair this year. The person who crosses the bridge may be the person who built the bridge in the previous life. Bai Xian was chewing on the roots of the grass, disapproving. In his hometown, no matter whether he is a sword repairer or not, he doesn't talk about this. Qin Lingjun continued, my master also said, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. If you don't believe it, don't believe it. You should live as you should. But if you believe it, that person, if he is living a life of happiness, that's a big deal. Spending more money will be able to make yourself feel at ease. Those who are struggling days will feel better in their hearts. And there will be so much hope in the days when there is no hope. Bai Xian finally understood these words. Qin Lingjun wanted to reach out to touch Bai Xian's head and Bai Xian turned his head. How can you touch it? You can touch it casually. Qin Lingjun smiled and patted Bai Xian's shoulder, then raised his palm and shook. Brother Bai Xian, don't you know my hand is like it was opened? Bai Xianqi smiled and said, if you have the ability, touch Nuansh's head. Qin Lingjun put on a predecessor's posture and said earnestly, Brother Bai Xian, it's because I'm not careful, otherwise you can't make friends with your mouth. Bai Xian raised his thumb, went around his shoulders, pointed to the Piyun mountain behind him. He said, you and Wei Shanjun, are you good friends? Qin Lingjun rolled his eyes. On the road came a young Taoist priest carrying a sword box. His appearance was so fair, in short he was not like a Taoist master who was soaring through the clouds. The young Taoist stopped at the pavilion. Before he could speak, Qin Lingjun jumped up and rushed out with a thunder. He bent over to the bottom, clasped his fists and was almost able to touch the ground. Ask Gao Master, is it a senior old in the 14th and 15th realms? Dare to ask Gao Master again, is it the great Master Long Hushan who is highly respected, looks up to the world and is one of heaven and man? Bai Xian picked up the teapot and drank tea, opening his eyes. This old brother Jingqing, is that how he makes friends with people? You know what a fart, this is all my Uncle Chen's secret world experience. Zhang Shanfeng was confused, shook his head and smiled. Of course not, and the trail level is not high. Qin Lingjun was relieved. Just to be careful, he still did not get up. He just raised his head and asked tentatively, then dare to ask this talented young Taoist commander, Which immortal mansion is the master of the mountain? Don't you have dazzling the other party is really a little Taoist in the cave realm? Zhang Shanfeng smiled and said, the master of the trail is not very popular at the bottom of the mountain, not to mention it. Qin Lingjun straightened up, quickly wiped the sweat on his forehead, laughed and said, where does the little road leader come from? But still standing in place as steady as a mountain, motionless. What if you are an expert from outside the world who likes to make jokes and deliberately slander people? Wouldn't it be an accident? Zhang Shanfeng said, the trail comes from Beiju Luzhou. This time I am going to Luopa Mountain to visit friends. Qin Lingjun smiled and said, what a coincidence, I am the worship of Luopa Mountain. Friends from the rivers and lakes are still given to me honor and got 2 nicknames. In the early years, Xiabatio and Yujianglang, now the Dragon King of Luopa Mountain, this one behind me, my surname is Bai. He is my good brother, but unfortunately, we do not accept outsiders, let alone disciples. Zhang Shanfeng explained with a smile. The trail has a teacher, but am friends with your mountain lord. I made an appointment with him to go out together for a long trip. Qin Lingjun was stunned on the spot. His master's mountain friend? Zhang Shanfeng said, my name is Zhang Shanfeng from Patafeng. Didn't Qin Pingon mention it to you? Bai Xian blurted out and said, Lai Difeng? Is the mountain on which the real fire dragon sits? The real fire dragon with magic skills is you. We Beiju Luzhou, the top handle in black and white on the hill? Qin Lingjun knew right away that he was dead. Because this is a saying that Pei Qian used to talk about when he was young. At that time, Pei Qian yearned for the rivers and lakes. In addition, Qin Pingon respected the real man Huolong. Whenever he talked about the deeds of the old man, he always said it with humor. Cannot lose the feeling of admiration. With ears and eyes, Pei Qian followed the old Taoist leader with great respect. Especially after taking over from Li Baoping as the martial arts leader, Pei Qian felt that he would be in trouble in the future, and he must become an old Taoist leader. Of course, when Pei Qian becomes a big girl, I don't like to talk about it. Zhang Shanfeng was also stunned. When did his master on the side of Luopa Mountain have such a loud saying? At the entrance of Luopa Mountain, Wanchu was busy, so he went down the mountain and came to the millet grain side. They ate melon seeds and chatted together, and they all wanted money. Although Pei Qian is already tall now, she is still Pei Qian. In the past, Pei Qian often took the millet grains to patrol the mountains, looking for those hornets' nests, not in a hurry. He called it to check the enemy's situation and found the hawthorn jujube and tea slices all the way to eat. Every time he went home, he would give Sister Nwanshu keep a bag. Pei Qian once urged millet grains to compete with the cocklebur, commonly known as idiots. He asked the millet grains to pick them off and throw them on top of his head. He laughed and said that Zayahipo, the girl's family, is married. As a result, the cocklebur with a head of millet grains, this thing is difficult to take off when it is stuck on clothes, so you can imagine the end of wearing a full head. In the end, of course, Pei Qian brought a little black girl who was crying and went to Sister Nwanshu to help clean up the mess. When he arrived at Nwanshu's house, he wrinkled bitterly with 2 small grains of brows, sitting on a small bench, tilting his head and looking pitifully at Pei Qian, who had arms around his chest and a face of disgust. Little girl. He vowed to say, Pei Qian, promise to pick it today and go back the day after tomorrow. The day after tomorrow. Why not go tomorrow? Will you eat it tomorrow? Xiaomi Lidi pulled her head and didn't speak, but she was secretly but she was still ingenious, and it didn't hurt to take off each cocklebur. Pei Qian sternly taught, Xiaomi grains, we are all killers of feelings. The most powerful group of assassins in the rivers and lakes can't bear this pain, so how can we go into the rivers and lakes with me in the future? Is there still a jujube? Nonsense, keep it for you, open your mouth. Just let go. Does it hurt anymore? It's so sweet. Nwanshu stared at Pei Qian from the side. Don't fool around with rice in the future. Pei Qian sighed. Millet, Sister Nwanshu thinks you are not very bright. Standing next to Tsin Henin, you two are like sisters who have been separated for many years. Nwanshuki smiled and said, don't talk nonsense. Millet is not stupid. Pei Qian said, hee. The millet grains are brilliant, so Tsin Han? Nwanshu lowered his eyebrows, smiled and said nothing. Remove all the cockleburs on the top of Nwanshu one by one. Millet grains shook his head and grinned. I feel that my brain is lighter by several kilograms. Just as Pei Qian was about to scare the millet grains, he asked the old cook to make a big pot of chopped pepper fish head. As a result, Nwanshu looked like an unknown prophet, and immediately stared at Pei Qian and stopped the conversation. Pei Qian had to give up and patted the head of the millet grains as a reward. Today's millet grains are in a good mood. Unlike a few years ago, every time I miss a good mountain lord or Pei Qian, I don't dare to let people know. I only dare to talk to the Baiyun who is passing by. There was a green bamboo stick and a golden pole on the knees of Millet. Remembering something, grinning and hurriedly stretched out his hand to cover his mouth and said, "Sister Nuanshu, let's go to Hongzhou town to play together. I know that place. It's very loud." Nuanshu smiled and asked, "Just the two of us?" The millet grain scratched his face, a little embarrassed. "Of course there are still good people." Xiaomili quickly explained, "It's not that I am timid but that I have short legs and I'm tired of walking thieves. I stand in the basket of the good man mountain lord. It's a little effortless." Nuanshu smiled and narrowed his eyes and stretched out his hand to twist the face of the millet grain. "That's it. The stream grows long and goes far away and the vegetation grows tall and tall. The old cook said that children who have not grown up will put their hearts on their lips, and when they grow up they will put their hearts on their hearts." An unshaven man in a blue shirt appeared in the Hure town on the border of Daquan. Unfortunately, the familiar inn was no longer there. This made him, the accountant, a little disappointed. "I heard that Junyang went to Yuguazong first and then to Zhong to Longhushan. I don't know if I meet next time Junyang will be fatter and thinner. She looks good. Don't know if they will meet again after the catastrophe, all suspicious in a dream? Today's Tongisao mountains and rivers are really devastated and cannot bear to see." He thought for a while. Instead of going to Dafu Academy, he planned to go to the buried river Bio Palace first to see if he could get a splash of water, flower wine and eel noodles there. These years he was really gluttonous. As for the goddess of water, whose surname is Lu Mingru, who dares to believe? Meeting the goddess of buried river water in the lobby of Na Bio Palace, the old rules, sitting opposite each other, one person with a large basin of noodles. Water god Empress stepped on the bench with one foot. "Brother Zhong, what's the taste? Is it better than the bowl of eel noodles back then? Other places do not bask in the sun or snow during the whole winter. Here in Bio Palace they bask in chili peppers. They are small, average-looking, crumpled but very spicy. The Chaotian peppers in the previous mansion were incomparable except for their appearance." Zhong Kuei wiped the sweat on his forehead, rolled up a large chopsticks noodles, swallowed it, lifted the wine bowl, sipped a mouthful and slapped all over his body. Old domineering. A cultivator who wants to taste the taste of the world, whether it is wine or dishes, even needs to deliberately condense aura, which is not a big joke. The water god Empress raised 3 fingers in succession. "I have seen Qin Pingon, the little master, and the world's best learned master Wen Xing, and the world's highest swordsman Zhua." Zhong Kuei smiled and said, "I went to the far door and I saw the holy saints, the sub-sages and 2 bodhisattvas from the Western Buddhist kingdoms, as well as many Buddhist monks and dragon elephants." Lu Ro depressed. "You said you are a big man with a handle. What is the difference between me and a lady without a handle?" Zhong Kuei smiled and said nothing. Yet another big chopstick noodle. Lu Ro made a full belch, put down his chopsticks, patted her stomach and asked, "What do you do when you come back this time? Go back to the academy and study in the study?" She turned her head and shouted, "Old Lu, hurry up and give me and Brother Zhong another bowl. Remember to change the 2 larger bowls. Just keep the 2 small bowls on the table. Brother Zhong still has a few chopsticks to eat. Finish." The old man at the door accepted. "Okay, wait a minute, mother. Lu Rookie smiled. "Standing on such a quick-spoken cook made me a rhubarb girl and be a mother for many years." Zhong Kuei shook his head and said, "I haven't thought about it for the time being. Let's walk around and have a look." After all, Zhong Kuei is now a ghost. In fact, Cheng Longzhou serves as the head of the academy. Since the Confucian temple has such a precedent, it is not difficult for Zhong Kuei to return to the academy. He has merits and has little resistance, let alone regaining his status as a gentleman. It's okay to be the deputy head of the academy, but Zhong Kuei thinks that it's not bad to be a casual cultivator like a ghost, not to mention that the mountains and rivers of Tongisao are broken, and the aftermath is needed everywhere. Lu Ro sighed and then smiled suddenly. "Forget it, you can do everything now, don't think too much." She suddenly lowered her voice. "Brother Zhong, do you know that our emperor and the little master, Small book booth used by book friends before." Zhong Kuei curled his lips. "Isn't Yao Jinji interesting to Qin Pingon? It's a matter of seeing through. The moon is full, remember when you don't, and the beautiful eyes are full of autumn water. But it certainly doesn't mean that Qin Pingon is close to Yao. In this respect, Qin Pingon is just a elm bump, but the problem doesn't seem to be about himself and Junyang. When he thinks of this, Zhong Kui is ruthless. Take a sip of wine. Lu Ro widened her eyes and said in shock, "You can see this? Have you opened your eyes?" Zhong Kui took a sip of wine, shivered, and the chili was the wine. It was really invincible. It's not that Yao Jinji really likes Qin Pingon, how can I put it? It's a matter of urgency. The more you think about it, the more you will be unable to let it go. It is similar to burying a jar of wine, except that one is buried in the ground and the other is buried in the heart. Lu Ro will be suspicious. You are an upright gentleman who has been a bachelor for many years, and you still understand the love of these children who are all around? Zhong Kui sighed, and the goddess of water also sighed. Zhong Kui smiled and said, "What are you sighing?" Lu Ro helplessly said, "I'm not young anymore, I'm worried about marrying." Fortunately, the 2 bowls of noodles were brought to the table again, at least not to worry about eating. After drinking and eating, Zhong Kui got up and left, and Lu Ro didn't send it away. He was polite with his brother, only that he would come often in the future. The night was heavy, and Zhong Kui wandered on the surface of the river at night, but there was a ghost who fell into a fairyland around him, the one who was found by Ning Yao at the beginning. After being detained by the Confucian temple, it was tossed and turned all the way, and finally was Li Xing personally distributed to Zhong Kui's side. To tell the truth, it would rather stay in the cage than to get along with Zhong Kui day and night, hit hard, kill Zhong Kui and then escape. Not to mention that there is no escape, and in fact no one knows who kills. It's not that Zhong Kui's realm is high, but Zhong Kui can't talk about the monk realm at all now, similar to the borderless. The key is that Zhong Kui just restrains ghosts, and that kind of suppression in the general sense. This ghost, temporarily named Gusu, looks like a fat man who thinks he is handsome. It sneered and said, "I can talk to a little girl for so long, she still doesn't look good, and the most terrible thing is that she still doesn't like you, Zhong Kui, it's really not me who said you. It's just a waste." The widow back then had 3,000 beauties in the harem. Just pick out a lady who looks more handsome than her. Hey, that figure, that hip pedal, that small waist and big breast, which one doesn't make people angry? Know what picture scroll is it more irritating than that? That is, they stand in a row, strip off their dresses and then turn their backs to you. Zhong Kui ignored the nonsense of the ghost. "It's all right, wipe your saliva and talk." "It's just that," Gusu said something awkward to himself. Zhong Kui said helplessly, "Don't break your mouth, can I beg you?" Gusu walked on the surface of the buried river and spit. It's useful to ask someone for a fart. If the rebellious officials and thieves are rebelling, it works if you ask the widows not to kill. The pig squeezed in the corner and hummed 3 times. "You are good, a boring gourd, you deserve to be a bachelor, put me in." Saw that Junyang afraid of anything, rush up and hug it, just gnaw it, cook the rice and cook it. This means that hungry dogs are not afraid of villains and good women are most afraid of anger. Zhong Kui couldn't listen, his mind moved slightly, and the fat man immediately fell straight into the water. After a while he stood up with a carp, grinning, not pretending, and slapped the flowing firefly on his body. Gusu stepped on the water and didn't dare to use any magical powers. He just splashed some waves and said in grief and indignation, "Fuck, don't grab anything and lie down in the coffin. If you meet you will be a widow." Zhong Kui asked, "I'm surprised, you are an emperor who has been born in hairpins for generations and then usurped the throne to establish the country. Where can there be so many vulgar and local dialects?" It was once a hero in the history of Hauran. He opened up many territories in Fuyao continent and was almost snatched by him before the Song clan of Dai. He completed the feat of one continent being one country. He died suddenly. Before, it actually occupied half of the mountains and rivers of Fuyao Island. Gusu smiled and said, "You don't understand this. The widows have several concubines who are from the village women. Don't squint. They are all private visits. They only learn from their looks and a stomach. It's attributable to the sturdy purse, masculine but not just money." Zhong Kui cursed, "Why don't you die?" The fat man laughed and said, "Widows are originally ghosts and they are almost dead and alive. Hey, having said that, there are too many ecstasy situations like this. In fact, the most invincible battlefield for widows is unfortunately not for outsiders. Only by teaching you a few skills and an invincible safekeeping place can you be considered worthy of walking in this world as a man." Zhong Kui asked in his heart, "How did you know that person back then?" The fat man was silent for a moment, looked up at the sky, squinted his hands and said, "A widow is considered to have lived for 2 lifetimes. Whether he was an emperor before his death or cultivating after his death, he never felt that he was lost to anyone and he rarely admired others, but that one must count. Means that Houran Jiaxing who later became wild and thorough." Fatty suddenly sneered again and again, "If it wasn't for Ning Yao." Zhong Kui raised his hand, "Stop it, shut up quickly and advise you not to say anything about Ning Yao in the future. It was heard by my good brother. It won't be enough for you to have one more life." The fat man snorted, "Just rely on Qin Pingyan's flying sword in the Jade State and at most a fist of the boundless martial artist? If the widow doesn't fall he will stand still and let the little baby hand his sword casually. Throw a punch and fight all day without incident." Zhong Kui smiled and said, "Okay, look back and find a chance to satisfy you." Zhong Kui's toes are a little bit and he rises up against the wind. As long as he is in the night, Zhong Kui swims far away so fast that Gusu, a ghost in the fairyland, has to be able to keep up. A continent of broken mountains and rivers, almost everywhere are battlefield sites, but an ancient character is missing. Zhong Kui finally stopped at a Xianfu ruins. The fat man sat cross-legged. "I said that when I was alive the old guy in Jinjiazu is not a good bird, no one believes it. If I was the emperor on Fiazu before, that battle would not be successful. Deputy virtue." It began to habitually spit and curse again. "A bunch of gods, they are not ordinary human eyes and there are sun and moonlights and they are still black and painted and they are blinded and they deserve to die." Fatty stopped talking suddenly because Zhong Kui's palm was resting on its head. "Understood it, if you say a few more words it's really awkward." The fat man immediately changed his words. "Widow to see the so-called peace except for the emperor's cultural and martial arts in the history books. In the final analysis, it is nothing more than giving the people a stable life without worrying about food and clothing, and every family is willing to cultivate a seed of reading who can read and write, can say a few words of the sages in the book. The widow's going out this time can be regarded as seeing the sun again, and it is no different from before. It looks with wide eyes plus those mountains. Rumors about the landscape of the country are scarcely visible, but the Song family's ability to manage the army can barely match the widow's back then. It has gleaming eyes, clenched fists in both hands and its face is full of pride. Iron cavalry stopped, war horse drinking water, river water reflected iron armor. It was enough to kill the dragon. Please show your face." Zhong Kui angrily smiled and said, "Is it useless to ask? Zhong Kui, you were a gentleman in the academy in your early years and you have become a talent." It said sincerely, "If you are lucky you can meet widows sooner and award you a bachelor of the Hanlin Academy, and make sure you don't blink your eyes." Zhong Kui smiled and said, "I never thought you would say a few more human words." The fat man's mantra is to drag it out and give him death. Throw into the well, divide the body with 5 horses, give a glass of wine and reward the white silk. It exclaimed, "Who said no, who has never been a human?" Zhong Kui smiled. The fat man immediately shouted, "Widow is wrong." Before going to extradite the lonely ghosts, Zhong Kui suddenly glanced in the direction of the Daoist site and muttered, "That kid is okay now." The fat man sneered and said, "I just found a good wife, what's so great?" Don't need Zhong Kui to say anything at all. The fat man has already beaten his chest and feet and said with a sorrow, "I envy the dead, this kid is an expert." Suddenly, the fat man stopped his voice and began to spit again. "A student of the Hanlin Academy, if you Zhong Kui fell into my hands early, you won't be allowed to be an official even if you get the top pick in the exam." The reason why it is so heroic is of course that Zhong Kui has swam far away right now, saying that it is not far away like a step away going to the other side, saying that it is close or not, the faint difference, the world is separated. On a dark road. The old ancestor of Xiandan City who walked through the sun, the ascended realm ghost Xianwu Cry, suddenly stopped moving. Wuxia had just started to kill a little bit, his body was like a raging fire, and his soul was like cooking in a frying pan, and Wuxia had to immediately dispel that wishful thinking. Because a young man in a bright red robe appeared in front of it, holding a jade what in one hand and a pen in the other, and there was a book in front of him. The first sentence of this person was extremely arrogant. "You kowtow first, I will chat." Qingming Xianxia. A burly man and a handsome boy with a tiger head hat are now in the strange land of Qingming, doing old things in his hometown, visiting the mountains and visiting immortals. It is Lu 16 who has traveled through the Qingming world, and Bai Yi who has just become a pure sword repairer at Xianduguan. Not long ago Lu 16 hit Bai Yujing with a punch and then dragged Bai to escape. At that time, the second Daoist who was in charge of Bai Yujing did not make an exception to investigate this kind of offense. Not only did he not use the sword, he didn't even mean to do it. It was just that the Taoist immortals on the 12th floor of the 5th city showed their magical powers. With that punch, just say one of the cities and there will be Lingbao's grand atmosphere like a rainbow. In the end, Yudo just glanced at the horizontal tiger head cap boy from a distance. The second Dao's face was stern, and in the end it seemed that he still couldn't hold it back. A light smile. For the most proud of the awe-inspiring world, Yudo is willing to respect a bit. Otherwise Yudo would not lend his sword to Bai Yi. At that time Jiang Yunxing, who looked like a small Taoist boy, saw the expression of the second master teacher, as if he had seen a ghost in Bai Yujing. In the boundary of a dynasty Jiangyi, a heavy snow has just stopped. Walking in the snow, moonlight and snow are both good. During their travels the two friends saw a different style from Howren's world. Taoist officials are both monastic masters and officials of the secular dynasty. There is a world and there are Taoists everywhere. Taoism is the household registration that is superior to others. Whenever there was a flood in the jurisdiction, the local officials would use talisman to throw the river bank to break the place, or use the alchemy script to summon the gods to relieve the drought. There is that official holding a bamboo pole and crossing the Horsen Mountain. There are also Taoist officials who set up altars to cast spells to expel evil spirits, and the small pond is suddenly dry, and there is a small dragon entrenched in it. There are many deeds. Lu Shirlu walked slowly on the snow, and beside him was a boy with a tiger head hat who was difficult to associate with the name Bai Yi. In that hometown Bai Yi became famous during the Tianbao period. After practicing Taoism he was hailed as Bai Yes Poem before there was a month. Lu Shirlu took out a jug of wine and smiled. If you board that night ship, you might still meet some old people. The boy pulled the tiger head hat. It's all fake, it's not interesting. Lu 16 said, I plan to find someone, probably Dao Chang's son will help. The boy hummed, I'll open this mouth so don't owe favors. A few years ago near a Duku fish market two foreigners opened a new restaurant. The shopkeeper was a handsome brother who taught a surname to Bai Yujing and the boss wife was Yuan. Lu Tai here has always been in the mysterious posture of Yinshan, leaving his body to travel far away. And the woman who opened a restaurant and said she was the boss wife when everyone met, came from Sipai Foodie, named Yuan Ying, who has not yet entered the Taoist genealogy. The preacher is Lu Qianchao group. They are only in their 20s, but they are one of the 10 young people in the world. When she was on the list she was actually less than 20 years old. At that time she had only cultivated the Taoism for 8 years, and she had stagnated in the state of staying for 6 years, and then climbed to the sky in one step and entered the Yupu state. She fell in love at first sight with Lu Tai. Lu Tai traveled to Sipai Blessed Land, rushing to the half-month-old marriage book. Lu Tai has always had no good expressions on Yuan Ying, because he does not like women who are too good-looking, and he has no confidence to grow old together. The two of them set up this restaurant together in Huainan County, on the 3rd floor facing the river and mountains. It was Lu Tai who bought it for a big price. It used to be an inn with a deserted business. The scenery is beautiful and the screen windows open to the river. The water trees are green as hair. The restaurant is not far from the fish market. Lu Tai picks up various kinds of fresh seafood every morning on time and he personally cooks and cooks. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. There is also a ferry crossing in the county town. If there are beautiful or gorgeous women passing by, they will be upset and wear women's makeup and clothes. In fact, there is no immortal family in the Qingming world. Anyway, the immortal master must have a genealogy of Taoist officials. I saw someone wearing Taoist gowns on the road and I called him a master. It must be correct. The restaurant has several golden signatures such as steamed mandarin fish, deep-fried water turtle, bridge rice noodles and fresh pickled fish. Lu Tai also made friends with a group of mountain runners, so the restaurant has both fresh water and mountain delicacies. The price of the dishes is not only not expensive, and it is not expensive to the point where restaurants in the county town are jumping and cursing. There is no such thing in the world. Those who set up shops and do business don't want to make money, but just ask for not losing money. In addition to the restaurant, Lu Tai also hired skilled craftsmen from the mountain to build a waterfront pavilion, which served as a wine shop, surrounded by lotus flowers. Lu Tai often goes there alone to enjoy the scenery, and a leaf of a boat on the river floats by, like the story of life going back and forth. Occasionally there are old men drying fishermen by the water. They are all fathers and villagers who ask for life, but they are not bold and open-minded hermits. Lu Tai occasionally left the pavilion and went for a walk to chat with them, a few homely. Because I learned that here, besides the officials who have obtained the genealogy, all counties with top 3 in high schools, especially the top 3, the county officials can be promoted to 3 consecutive levels, and the people in the county can be tax-free for 3 years as a reward. So Lu Tai ran to participate in the imperial examination, and in the end, not to mention the champion, not even a Xianxia. The restaurant was still a big water table entertaining guests from all directions. At that time, the shopkeeper Lu, holding a jade bamboo fan close together, held his fists in all directions. Laughing, Yuaning looked in a daze. Lu Gongzi is so pretty. Suddenly blushed as if thinking of something, then his eyes firmed up and silently encouraged himself. Be sure to sleep, Lu Gongzi. He would use a pen of mutton fat and beautiful jade to turn the book, and he needs a glass bucket to eat. Can not only eat the essence and the fineness, but also can make a pot of tea, rice and wine. Therefore Lu Gongzi is both elegant and elegant. Vulgar. In the early spring of this year there is a lot of snow. Lu Gongzi often wears a folding fan around his waist, holding a green bamboo trekking pole, and likes to hike alone without her. In fact, for a cultivator such a big mountain is really not enough. And every time after drinking and sipping, Lu Gongzi always likes to say something inconspicuous, similar to our high-rise building facing the river and the mountains. The world is the best, but the 5th city and the 12th floor are no more. Why do you look for Bai Yujing if there are thousands of mountains and valleys? It seems that there is no small resentment towards Lu Qin and Bai Yujing. Yuaning didn't care about this and only felt that she and Lu Gongzi were a godsend good match. Only in the matter of eating Yuaning was a bit embarrassed. Because of the relationship between the teacher and Chao team, she said it was easy when she was young. When she opened her mouth she didn't feel strong, but she couldn't change it, and she liked eating garlic cloves when she was young. At first Yuaning was a little embarrassed. He always felt that a daughter's family always liked to use garlic and pickled beans as a side dish, which was a bit inappropriate. Unexpectedly Lu Tai likes her very much. If you say that, this is the only thing that is more desirable. Don't change it. In fact, Yuaning is extremely talented and he is very good at poetry and melody. After all, he is a direct disciple of Lu Qi and grew up in the blessed land of Ci Pai. How could he lack the character? That's why Lu Tai always teases her, such good lyrics and music, whispering from your mouth, smelling of garlic. She once accompanied the landing platform on several trips to the fish market. She had seen him bargaining with the vendors. The red-necked and staring-eyed Lu Gongzi at that time became more and more handsome and messed up. Yuaning doesn't matter. Those Yingyin Yen who entangled Lu Gongzi endlessly, a group of nympho vulgar fans, don't look good than Lu Gongzi. Besides, they still want to be with me. It's 1,000 miles away. Did they help Lu Gongzi wash clothes? The 2 selections that I didn't know who fiddled with before selected several 10 young people in the world and 10 alternates. Although there are unavoidable controversies, they have been regarded as the 2 most convincing lists in thousands of years. Only said that she was in the blue underworld, no more no less. In addition to Yuaning, there are also Daoist's little disciples, the fellow with the name Shanqing, and Lu Qin accepted his apprentices and went to Wuxia Tianxia. However, he was so dying and provoked Fei Xingcheng. He was beaten by Ning Yao. There is also a pure swordsman named Qigu. The luck is very good. If he is out of the list a few years later, he won't have his share. I heard that I went to an unknown battlefield site, which is expected to break the bottleneck at the top of the mountain and become a martial artist. But the most talked about selected person is the guy with the nickname 22. As a disciple of the Taoist ancestor, Shanqing has nothing to talk about. In the words of Dashuan Duguan's son Dao Chong, even a dog tied to the door of the Taoist ancestor can be a god. Yuan Ying's background was vague because he wanted to talk more and didn't have a chance, plus he hadn't fought with anyone. Chatting about, at most he would go around that one step to the sky and repeatedly say some chaotic things really meaningless. Taoist Wang Yunlu, a line of rice thieves whose background is not recognized by Bai Yujing, is not a big no-no. But that Su Jun, not the same, is simply a fascinating legendary novel. He has a mediocre background and mediocre cultivating aptitude. He became a handyman disciple and a childhood sweetheart. He went to the mountains to practice together. He had better aptitude than him and ended up being embraced by others. In the course of a later experience, in order to save the rivals including the lover, he did not hesitate to step forward and become a ghost for death and disappeared. If the story in the book ends here, it will at most make some girls who are ignorant of love take out a handkerchief and a handful of bitter tears. Unexpectedly, when Su Jun appeared again as a ghost, he won a heaven of heaven with a very high rank. He was born out of the sky step by step and soon became the lord of a sect. The hostile sect that lasted for thousands of years has turned fighting into a jade silk, and the methods are even more unexpected to break the head. Su Jun directly married the ancestor of that sect. That woman, Ming Dynasty Song Dao title re-examination, is a pinnacle of Ascension realm. She was one of the 10 people in the Qingming world in her early years, but then she retreats so that the sect master never saw her afterwards. One side. As a result, when she reappeared in the world, she married Su Jun, a man who was less than 50 years old, and the two became a couple. Such a pair of immortal couples is really too rare. The world was in an uproar. Even the invincible who likes to fight with people as soon as he shows up, Bai Yujing's second head teacher Yu Do, made an exception to the wedding banquet to congratulate him, and he sat at the same main table with Sun Daochang, and neither of them started fighting. It can be seen how much faith Su Jun has. In addition, there are three-handed teacher Lu Chen on the main table and an unknown female crown, but since she can sit at the main table, fools can guess what the Taoism is. A blue underworld, Su Jun alone holds 2 sections. Bai Yujing's 3 masters taught Lu Chen Xian Du Guan Sun Huaizhong, the sub-sage of the Confucian temple in the world, and the world's first person in alchemy. They all seem to have been quite optimistic about him and each had the knowledge of teaching Taoism. Probably this is the so-called hard life and good life and still be human. In fact, Su Jun is really not the kind of deep-seated man in the city. His ideas are simple and often even a little naive. However, when faced with ups and downs and in a difficult situation, he can always turn the bad into the good. Wu Fuqigu and his friend Wang Yunlu used to travel here in secret, because the two are fellow villagers and both were born in Wuling County of the Great Dynasty. Qigu came to ask Yuan Ying about the 9 realms of Qinyingguan. How on earth? Wang Yunlu is a short, taciturn young man, not surprising in appearance and even with a somewhat natural shrinking look. If he takes off the robe, he is simply a farmer in a rural village. Even if his clothes are clean, he is a kind of the sloppy feeling, and the small eyes, even if you are looking at people in a proper way, are probably mistaken by the woman for a bachelor with wicked eyes. But in fact, this young Taoist priest from an improper background is extremely capable of fighting. Generally speaking, he is a person who is willing to make concessions, but as long as he makes a move, he is extremely cruel and never leaves his mouth. Those who have good things have helped to calculate the number of shots on the mountain where Wang Yunlu was alone in the practice. There were 16 shots in total. He killed nearly 100 people just because of the genealogy official. Lu Tai didn't have a good face towards that reckless husband Qi Qi, but instead he had a good relationship with Wang Yuanluo. On the wine table, Wang Yuanluo seemed to be naturally timid and shy. He didn't know how to find words to toast with others. When Lu Tai made a toast, he would habitually bow his head and bend over, holding a cup in both hands, and drank without saying a word. In the end, this young Taoist priest with the title of rice thief was toasted by Lu Tai a lot, and he drank high, his eyes were red and he choked. These years have been so miserable, I can't help it. Tonight, the moon and stars are sparse. In the waterside pavilion, the land platform is leaning against the pavilion pillar, closing your eyes and resting, gently shaking the fan. Goodness has good destiny, fan has good destiny. Yuan Ying sat aside and read a collection of poems from the lotus flower blessed land. It is said to have been compiled by a wealthy young man named Zhou Lian. In Yuan Ying's view, those poems are uneven, but Zhou Lian's commentary is very awakening. Mind. The end of the pen, soft and thick here, it has a lot of sweetness, especially it can make Vanity Fair drunks infinitely useful. The 7 characters are the most wonderful, beautiful, and they are not those who do not eat the incense of the world and cannot have this dusty language. Reading this word in the hot summer, like hearing the sound of snow breaking bamboo in the middle of the night, you have a clear vision. Reading here is like seeing a quiet person, and the pine nuts fall in the empty mountain several times, which will move the cold-eyed and hard-hearted generation outside the book. Since the ancient poets, the famous poets have turned brown clothes and yellow ribbons, and this is the only one. Yuan Ying was amazed. This guy named Zhou Lian, it is a pity that he didn't write poems by himself. Well, the small letters with hairpins in the book are also beautifully written. Lu Tai was closing his eyes and resting, thinking about the words of his ancestor. The sky is dry and things are dry, be careful of candles. It was originally Ruanxiu who went to the sky. Gong Shen Huangquan, public don't blame God. It was the young boy Tianjun in the drugstore in his hometown. Wind and snowy night. It means Chun Pingon. These are all Lu Chen's words. The two preaching mentors of Lu Tai are Tan Tian, Zhou Zi and Haoran swordsman Pei Min. As for the sword repair Lu Kai? In these years Lu Tai gets upset when he thinks of this name. Yuan Ying couldn't help asking, Master Lu, have you seen this Zhu Lian in Uwafudi? Lu Tai put away his thoughts, smiled and shook his head and said, I haven't seen it before. It seems that he was taken out of the blessed land. According to Lu Chen, he became an old cook on the side of Luapa Mountain, almost like me. Unfortunately, Zhu Lian spent the whole year covered with skin, very stingy, not to feast the eyes of others. Lu Tai smiled and said, Yuan Ying, your affection is just following a red line of marriage, which is meaningless. Yuan Ying Ruru said, it's just a marriage relationship, isn't it good? Yuan Ying frowned slightly, looked up at the two people by the river, and reminded Lu Tai heartily, Yo, two great figures are here. It was actually that Su Jun, the Ascension champion, who regained the Dao No. Lu Tai still didn't open his eyes. I like Qingqing, I'll go to bed, and casually said, this is such a great man, I'm afraid we can't hold our small eyes. Yuan Ying couldn't help being handsome. The world was no more than a pair of eyes. Who said that? The young man stopped more than 10 steps away from the pavilion and hit a gate chief. Su Jun has seen Mr. Lu, Miss Yuan. Lu Tai raised the folding fan in his hand. It's too polite, I won't send it far. Yuan Ying just learned, waved his poem collection. If it weren't for Lu Gongzi, she would still get up and pay the courtesy. Chao Gu coldly looked at the young men and women in the pavilion. I am young, courageous and a big air. Su Jun patted her arm lightly and she nodded without any movement. Su Jun always stood there and asked with a smile, dare to ask Miss Yuan, can the junior see Mr. Lu in the future? Before Su Jun went to the mountain to practice, he came from a poor background and went to the market. He listened to a lot of Lu Chi's poems and admired it very much. Yuan Ying nodded and said, you must be able to see it. Su Jun smiled and walked away with a fist and said heartily to the Taoist priest beside him, Lu Gongzi is a casual person, don't mind. Chao Gu smiled and said, as long as you don't mind, I don't care. Lu Tai put away the folding fan and started to drive people. Yuan Ying insisted on not leaving. Lu Tai had to lie down and sleep on his own while Yuan Ying read the book. When the sky is white, there is a flat boat which is swiftly fast, stops abruptly in the heart of the river, and then moored to the pavilion. A young man with a tiger head hat, a burly man. It is Bai Yi and Lu 16. Lu 16 jumped ashore, strode into the pavilion and smiled heartily, come to say thank you. Lu Tai had already gotten up and replied respectfully, the junior has seen Mr. Lu. Deliberately did not recognize that the boy was Bai Yi. What's the matter if it's white? Lu Tai didn't admire anything. He wrote so many poems that floated up and down. Lu Tai was a sword repairer, but he was afraid of heights when he was young. Yuan Yingshinshin got up and gave a blessing to the two guests. What the chief inspector does, it's too strange. In this way it is more like a woman who goes out with her husband to entertain guests. Broadcast. App. It's really good, it's worth installing, even Android and Apple phones support it. Lu 16 smiled and said, you don't need to call you mister, you can't afford it, just call me Zhou Xian. Back then Lu Tai accompanied the younger brothers to visit Tongyi's house and helped a lot. Especially that time he almost broke the secret with a single word, which caused Lu Tai's injury to be serious. As a disciple of Wensheng's line, Zhou Xian must appreciate her. Yuan Ying asked, are you Bai Yi? White also nodded. Yuan Ying asked again, why did you wear a tiger hat? Bai also had no expression on his face, turning his head to look at the river. Yuan Ying added cautiously, it's so beautiful. Lu Shirlu held back a smile and reminded, little girl, don't mention this. Let me hold back, at least wait for me and Bai to leave and then have a good chat with Lu Tai. Yuan Ying blinked and whispered, it's really great. Lu 16 did not stay long, chatting with Lu Tai, and Hubai left the pavilion and continued to travel far. Took Yuan Ying back to the restaurant. Lu Tai went back to his yard, closed the door and sat on the steps in a daze. A few years ago Lu Tai built a snowman in the yard and he did not melt snow all year round. Lu Tai fell back and used his hands as pillows. At the time of Tongyi's Hao, Lu Tai, in order to break the heavens with Qin Pingon, cost more than the instability of the Taoist heart. He almost collapsed on the spot. Moreover, at the time, Lu Tai vaguely saw Qin Pingon standing behind him with a vague figure. I only saw a pair of golden eyes so condescending looking at the land like an ant. It's like the rudimentary form of a certain one in Qin Pingon. It may come from 10,000 years ago or after 10,000 years, God knows, God knows. Sword of Coming Chapter 860. The city on the edge of Zhou sect is crowded and bustling. It is a bit more lively than the capital of the Cloud Pattern dynasty. It is mostly the monks of the lower 5 realms who are incomplete except for those who sell and drink. It is a foreigner who came here to do wine business or to travel here. The restaurants, large and small, are much like the Jianxi Great Wall in the early years. You can find wine when you get the money. When you wake up, you can sit in front of a cup and sleep under the table after drunk. The background of the sect in the wild world is clear at a glance, depending on how many people there are. However, the Zhou sect itself has no strife. It is far inferior to the fairy hairpin city, both openly and secretly. Inside the sect, there are 2 cultivators of the upper 5 realms, an old celestial sect master who thinks about making sages every day, and Yupu who is unwilling to inherit the sect master. The ancestor of Jing's Hanglu and the rest of the sect, regardless of men and women, are almost all drunkards who are proficient in winemaking and love to drink. They are really true and they will be soaked in the wine tank for a lifetime. Qi Tingji, who came here as a guest, habitually drank slowly, but Lu Ji was a big bowl of booze and his face flushed. Previously, Qi Tingji specially selected 2 Juquanzong wines that Aliang described as ration wines, and Lu Ji, 1 person and 1 pot, are cheap and good. Every time Aliang secretly travels through the wilderness, he will come to Zhou sect to hang around for a few days before he will return. Lu Ji stretched out his thumb and wiped the corners of his mouth. In fact, after so many years at the Great Wall of Jianxi, I haven't been particularly happy or sad. Someone once said that in the matter of drinking, one must be furious and drunk, or be overwhelmed with joy and compassion, in order to drink the real taste of alcohol, and make people sad and connected with the world. Qi Tingji smiled and said, "So you haven't really been drunk, it's no small regret. I am looking forward to seeing Lu Ji's drunk state once in Longquan Jianzong in the future." Lu Ji shook his head. He didn't think he would drink so badly. He glanced at Qi Tingji and said, "You seem to be really willing to fall in Haoran heaven. In Sword Qi Great Wall Sword Repair, there has always been no shortage of handsome men and beautiful women. The old sword fairy in front of him must be counted as one." Qi Tingji gave the answer, "In my opinion, a vast world is like a human body with a full heart, and although the limbs are sick there will be no major problems, and every time the illness is recovered it is a kind of growth. So it is suitable for opening there. Zhongli School, open branches and leaves. Besides, in the future we will have next sects such as the Wild World and Wuxia Xianxia, each building one. Whether you manage a family or expand the sect, it is completely different from a person who is sullenly practicing." Lu Ji got annoyed when he heard these serious things. He raised the wine bowl again and drank his head up. Lu Ji suddenly turned his head. Qi Tingji frowned slightly. The day and night that had just passed, the yin and yang went wrong, the world was terrified. This kind of vision is not impossible for the 14th realm great monk. Looking at the general direction, it seems that it was deliberately aimed at Guishu Tattoo. Lu Ji didn't care anymore, soon too lazy to think. In the group, there are both the scheming Qi Tingji and the young hidden official who does everything without any problems. It is her turn to bother her brains? At the wine table elsewhere in the wine shop, a monster monk's eyes lit up, raised his falsely, looked down, looked at the beautiful scenery below the woman's waist and slammed a few times. "There are big long legs. After covering your face." The friend at the same table immediately answered, "It takes a lot of trouble to cover your face, and let the ladies lay down there." Lu Ji patted his thigh without turning his head and said, "Come and touch it." A wine shop booed all around, slapped the table vigorously, for the monster monk who took the lead in opening the conversation. The shopkeeper of the wine shop is not surprised at this. After drinking wine, who is not a sword fairy and drinking enough, is a new throne. The monster cultivator laughed and said, "Really? You begged me for this?" Qi Tingji smiled and said nothing. This is something that Aliang dared not do. Qi Tingji poured himself a bowl of wine. The jug had bottomed out. After drinking this bowl he should go to the Wooding River. I don't know what Chen Pingon is asking for. The demon cultivator just got up, the long-legged woman was just drinking, but the sword light in the wine shop instantly became bright. Get up from the monk, cut from head to toe like a knife, cut the body on the spot and divide it into 3. The rest of the drinking monks or their heads were wiped by a light, their heads were cut off or they were cut off. Except for the wine shop shopkeeper who was still safe and sound, his legs were soft, and he had to press his elbows against the counter to prevent himself from slumping to the ground, so as to avoid a slight disturbance. The female sword fairy mistakenly thought it was a provocation. As for the other dozens of people who came here to drink, the monster monks were all dead in an instant. Injured by accident? Wrong kill? This is not the wine table of Jianqi Great Wall. Lu Ji glanced at the 2 empty flasks on the table and said, check out. The shopkeeper of the wine shop is just an old monk in the Dragon Gate realm, with a dry mouth and speechless. Lu Ji took out a small summer coin and put it on the table. Drinking and repayment is too bad for character, Lu Ji can't do this kind of activity. When Qi Tingji got up he found out a piece of Zhou Xian and said to the shopkeeper, go and talk to Jiuquan's sect. I will help repay the wine debt that Aliang owed here. Lu Ji smiled and said, if the money is not enough to pay the debt, wouldn't it be embarrassing? Qi Tingji said, more do not retreat and less do not make up. After that, the 2 sword repairmen rushed to the next mountain city. It is located on the top of a mountain on the bank of the Wooding River in the waters of the Ilua River. At the foot of the mountain, there is a shrine with almost no incense. The mountain shrine did not dare to be built in a wide view. From the top of the mountain, it can be seen that within the jurisdiction of the Fulua River, the status difference between the gods of mountains and waters. As soon as the 2 of them appeared they saw a bizarre picture. The water hung high, reflecting thousands of miles of green mountains and rivers, and the water nets in the air were staggered, like a towering tree collapsed and hundreds of branches were crawling together. Every branch of the river that leaves the riverbed waterway and is dragged in the air and spreads is a tributary of the river. Qi Tingji's sword lifted into the sky, looking far away, looking down the trail of the main river. I saw the old throne, the big demon Fei Fei, but the real body of the demon clan was not revealed. She just relied on sitting in the small world and water law. Divine power, offering a majestic figure that seems not to lose the height of the lotus crown Daoist. The figure of Fei Fei, the position of her feet are 2 buildings that are far away from the river and water palace. She stepped on the 2 roofs. The ruins at the feet, the bright yellow and green glazed tiles on the ground were broken. Fei Fei bent her knees slightly at this time, stretched out her hand to grab the hanging trolling river and leaned back. She is a young woman with scarlet eyes and a robe named Water Vessel. The thousands of warp and weft threads are all rivers refined by her, both in the wild world and in Tongya. Tonic over there. A white wrist is tied with a string of golden bracelets, refined from dozens of dragon genus natal gems, rippling with green ripples, like rings of divine treasures. There is a pair of embroidered shoes on her feet, with 2 huge liju adorned at the toe of the shoe. At this moment, the liju is frantically competing with the human law for water transportation and dragging down the river water transportation steadily. In the wild world, certain avenue battles are extremely cruel. The small fish eat shrimps and the big fish eat the small fish. The monks who are on the top of the avenue, it is best to have a climbing avenue behind them. Travelers, at most, there are some non-threatening existences on the side of the mountain, and then they are densely clustered at the foot of the mountain. When they are hungry they go down the mountain, and when they are full they will be refined into their own great luck. In the past, Yangji and Fei Fei split the wild 80% of the water transport. As a result, no one was able to join the road to the 14th stage, and the 2 sides stagnated at the peak of the ascension stage for thousands of years. Hanging rivers were torn apart on the spot by the 2 sides. Heavy rains caused floods everywhere on the earth. But every water that landed, the water transport has been divided up by the 2 sides, and they poured into the Taoist sleeves and the toes of the Fei Fei shoes. Lu Ji came to Qi Tingji and said, in this comparison our sword repairers are fighting, and it is really not good enough. Qi Tingji joked, how come it's like a country Tian Rong grabs water? Lu Ji nodded and said, no wonder our hidden officer is so good, dare to return to the old business. Fei Fei furiously said, Qin Ping'an, I have a grudge against you? Do you have to come to Luluo for trouble? If it is replaced by a sword repairman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, even if it is the engraved old sword fairy of Dongsanging and his like, even if the sword is sharp, the water transport of the dragging river will eventually be damaged, even if more than 100 rivers are disturbed by the sword chi shredded. But after all, sword repair can't take water transport. At most, it will let Fey Concubine spend hundreds of years in her path, delaying her broken realm, and Fey Concubine will go to another place to grab water transport and tear down the east wall to make up the west wall. If Tua Yueshan did not stop her, she could always make up for the consumption. She never thought that encountering this young hermit who seemed to be born on the avenue of water would actually have an avenue battle with her to stop the wife and aunt. Fey Concubine's fascinating concubine grasped the turbulent tiling river, pulled back vigorously, gritted his teeth and said, "If you have the ability, go to Tua Mountain to sprinkle." Once Fei Dao is water, and besides she is still an old throne big demon, her eyesight must be higher than that of Zuampa's half-hanging ascendant realm. It is certain that the true body of this 10,000-foot Dharma is the last hidden official Qin Pingon. As for how Qin Pingon became a 14th-level cultivator, Fei was not interested in asking the bottom line. She just cursed Tuyueshan in her heart and even allowed this guy to go deep into the barren hinterland. Next to Qi Tingji and Lu Ji, there was a purple-golden lotus hovering on each other, and the spiritual energy gradually dissipated, as if it was just enough to support a fragrant time. During this period they helped the two sword repairs to isolate the secret. Must be Lu Chen's handwriting. Ning Yao was standing on the Wooding River where the riverbed was already dry, and beside her, there was also a lotus flower slowly rotating around her. Participated in the discussion at the Qin Turkish Confucian Temple. Qin Pingon actually said that since he returned to his hometown he didn't care about anything. Anyway, he didn't care about it, he just took care of his practice. Turned out to be good, but it's really hard work. Daoist's great Dharma, and the Fei joined forces to gather hundreds of rivers in the waters of the descent into the main river, stretching them into a long suspended river of tens of thousands of miles. The Taoist began to step forward and walk forward, with both hands continuously wrapping the main road like a rope around his arms, strangling countless water spirits among them. A Taoist priest in Xing-yi with a misty figure and a vague face, standing on one shoulder of the Taoist Faxiang in the crown of the lotus, holding the tail of the whisker in his hand, swiping the dust and pointing towards the river mansion in the distance. Smiled and said, "Luo Tianzhong will leave the stars again, the stars will return to their positions according to the edict, and the edict of the sun and the moon will be reborn." In the hundreds of dry riverbeds in the waters of the Lulua River, there have been erected green bamboo poles, as many as 3,600 bamboo poles, just in line with the number of Luotian Dajiao, which is the highest in Taoism. A little bald novice monk riding a fire dragon with a long sword hanging on his waist and a page of golden scriptures, standing on the head of the fire dragon, his hands folded, and silently said, "The Dharma walks into the world and acts as a lion among the crowd." Following the law, a golden lion as big as a mountain, full of energy after landing, raised his head and roared, smashing countless ghosts and charms of the dangling river. This lion, which borrowed the Dharma, leaped towards the face of the Fei. In these visions of heaven and earth, an inconspicuous figure descended from the sky. It was pulled by the Qi machine on the way, changed its trajectory a little, and came to a wild suburban ridge on the edge of the Lulua River. It was the criminal officer who returned to the world from the moon. Vegetarian. Avatar of Lu Qin, sitting on a tree trunk, dangling his legs, admiring the battle between the young hermit and the Fei concubine from afar. Since ancient times people have been busy, and the third master of Bai Yujing said, "This wisdom is in the eyes and 10 directions, and this wisdom is in the 3 lives." The 10 directions of the 3 generations are immeasurable, and the hands and eyes can show thousands of kinds. If it is magical waiting for the water and moon, it is clearly visible. If a person sees a bodhisattva, a person is a child of a bodhisattva. Lu Qin stretched out his hand and patted the trunk lightly, smiling, and nodded to himself. "Farewell to ask for strange things, it is a bad law." Haosu is not surprised by Lu Chen's Buddhist language. Lu Xun asked with a smile. "That moon run charm is still easy to use?" "Is not in the Qingming world, his moon running charm is here, which may be greatly reduced." Haosu nodded. "It works as expected of Zhang Dafu." Lu Chen's moon talisman, as well as the jade axe talisman of the palace lord Wu Shuangjiang, and the Taiqing light body talisman, also known as the daylifting talisman, are well-deserved Dafu. The so-called Fulua in fact has an unwritten rule, that is, whether there is a first Fulu, whether it can be among the world-recognized big amulet. The great master Bai Yujing of the Qingming world, son Daochong of the great profound capital, the senior brother of old Guanzhou who was beheaded by Yudo with a sword, the awe-inspiring Fulu Yuxuan, the great heavenly master of Long Hushan, and the wild side here Huangwan, the great demon of the old throne, the lord of the Lotus Nunnery, and the palace lord of the Yufu Palace who have disappeared for many years are all recognized as the top masters of Fulu. It seems that in addition to the swordsmanship, Lu Qin belongs to the 7 orifices and the 6 orifices, and the other methods are very proficient. There is no side door that Lu Qin has not dabbled. However, this Bai Yujing third headmaster in the Qingming world has not been rumored to have killed any 14th level cultivator. The 3 disciples of Taoist ancestors took turns in charge of Bai Yujing for 100 years. Every time it was Lu Chen's turn to take control of Bai Yujing, he almost never ignored things. Occasionally, the great monks violated the rules and taboos. Lu Chen just went to the door to keep accounts. Only reminded the other person outside the door, saying a similar set of words. You must live a few more years and wait for my second brother to come back from the outside world to reminisce. Lu Shen shook his sleeves and jokingly said, it was given to the criminal officer by a hidden officer. I really envy you. Old Sister Qi and Sister Lu have to bend over to pick up the leak. You are the easiest. From the big sleeves of the Taoist robe he shook out the real body of the Xuanpu, and the Ascension Realm demon pill was still there. With this combat exploit, it was enough for Haosu to have an explanation at the Confucian temple. Haosu put the mysterious snake in his sleeve and raised his eyebrows. On another site, Qin Pingon can still kill an ascendant realm, or can he save a complete demon pill? I thought that this trip to the wild hinterland would kill at most 2 fairyland monster races. Unexpectedly there was such a big surprise. Lu Shen smiled and shook his head, and roughly explained to the criminal officer that the city lord of the fairy hairpin city had been killed by his master Wuxia. Haosu became more and more puzzled. That Xuanpa's ability to kill is so poor? He was completely killed by Wuxia within less than a stick of incense? Xuanpu was not able to escape the Patriarch Hall? How does this Ascendant Realm Great Demon feel like a vast Nangwangwing in the world? According to Haosu's impression, the Ascended Realm Great Monks in the wild world can still fight very well. Even if the killing power is not outstanding, at least they are good at running. Lu Chen slapped his knees with his hands and squinted his eyes and smiled. Isn't the age of the fairy hairpin city bad? One crop is not as good as one crop. You haven't seen that fairyland silver deer, it's even more papery. No way if you say it. Hauran's craftsmanship in the world is that the disciples of the church starve to death the master, so on this mountain, it is often the disciples of the church who kill the master. The old one will hide a few hands on the bottom of the box. Anyone who is small will try to secretly crack the vow made in the Patriarch Hall in the early years. That's right. Anyway, it's not a human being. Why should I believe in the human heart? Haosu glanced at both sides of the tug-of-war, and asked casually, when will we play the sword? Wouldn't we just watch the play like this? Lu Chen glanced at the Fei Fei's face in the distance. Don't worry, just wait for the hermit to find the right time to give an order. At this time Fei Fei's sister is still more cautious. There are still a few retreats. It is probably hidden. The official asked you not to run in vain and then began to make plans for Lu Ji. Didn't you want to engrave on the head of the city? If you can kill the old throne Fei Fei with one sword, go back to the Great Wall of Sword Qi and engrave the word, Lu. It's great to engrave this character, absolutely. I'll talk to Sister Lu later. As long as she is willing to engrave the character Lu instead of the Ji, the sword box won't have to be returned. Lu Shen sighed. Qi rubbed his chin. Unfortunately, there are opportunities for engraving, but it may not be possible. If you want to cut the Fei concubine who is temporarily the co-lord of the world and water transport, naturally it cannot be that the swordsmanship is not enough. You may be almost lucky. Haosu remembered something and then asked, since the silver deer have been picked out, why didn't Qin Pingon find the opportunity to kill the ghost and fairy Wuxia? It's not that Haosu was greedy for this battle, but just because of the grievances between Xianyan City and Jianqi Great Wall, and logically speaking Wuxia would never be let go. Lu Chen explained with a smile, Xuanpu is a thing you must die. It is a disaster to let it stay in the fairy hairpin city. Wuxia is more dispensable. A ghost and immortal who can only stay on the path of the dark and dying. It's not enough to let us have extra branches during this trip. Moreover, Qin Pingon has his own considerations. He doesn't want the barbaric world to lose a squatting pit and not shit. Otherwise, once Wuxia gives up a road position, if the barren world just has more an ascension realm that fills the gap, that's all. What if Xuanpu and Wuxia were killed in succession? And this extra luck would make a certain ascendant peak break the bottleneck of the avenue and create a new 14th realm out of thin air. Haosu nodded. Except for choosing me as a criminal officer, the boss of the Sword Fairy is indeed very good looking at people. Lu Chen asked curiously, how did the old Sword Fairy persuade you to stay? Haosu is not like a person who listens to persuasion, and Qing will not force Haosu to stay. Haosu was silent for a moment, took out a jug of wine, lifted the mud seal and drank a swig of the drink. The old Sword Fairy told me a few words back then. Lu Chen became more and more curious. Which 2 sentences? Haosu gives the answer. I don't care if there will be an ascendant swordsman in the wild world. The matter of revenge, if you slaughter people as a monster monk, maintain the identity of Howren swordsman with you and take the head of the enemy, they are actually 2 things. Lu Chen nodded vigorously and said, it is indeed what the old Sword Fairy could say. Just 2 words to persuade me, there is actually another heart-to-heart word. Haosu smiled and said, the old Sword Fairy reminded me that if you insist on going to the wild world to practice swords, you can go there, don't stop, but one day I will be lucky enough to be among the 14th level of sword repair, and then dare to appear in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. On the battlefield he would kill me first. Lu Chen sincerely praised. Boss Xian is really a good elder who persuades others to be kind. Haosu smiled, and there is something else which is really unwilling to say more. The old Sword Fairy finally patted the young Xianxia on the shoulder. It's a good thing for young people to be vigorous, but don't rush to let yourself be sharp. This is the same as a big kid wearing open crotch pants on the street. Sleeking again. After Qingdu walked alone in the city with his hands behind his back. Haosu squatted on the branch and threw out the empty jug. Why do you look at me with admiration? Lu Chen came to the wild world. He originally planned to take the criminal officer to travel to Qingming, but he accidentally got on the thief ship of the young hermit. Lu Chen smiled and said, your realm is high, Ascension Realm Sword Repair. Do you think there are many Qingming worlds? Not many. Besides, it can be regarded as sympathy because we all have a small regret in our hearts. Lu Chen regretted that he had let down the dragon girl. Before Haosu took the sword to the blessed land in his hometown, he had an agreement with a woman he liked and would go back to find her. Insert an app. A perfect re-engraving of the old version of the book-chasing artifact, an app that can change the source. Haosu suddenly asked, what kind of person is the real Lu Chen? The 3 head teachers of Bai Yujing in front of him and the one who traveled by boat to visit the immortals in the world, may still be connected to the road, but his words and deeds are quite different. So Haosu always suspected that the Lu Chen in front of him was not Lu Chen's real body at all. Lu Chen hugged the back of his head with both hands and gave 3 sentences. Green water travels on a boat, green mountains passers-by, thousands of years wear the world and go to immortals, ride the white clouds to the emperor's hometown. This is Lu Chen talking about his path of cultivation. If he doesn't want to be mixed up in the Howren world, then change his place. The hometown of the cultivators is the place where Taoism rests. The mediocre people are disturbing themselves, and the mountains and trees are also inferior. Although the world is great and there are so many things, but I know the wings and concentrate on it. This is probably Lu Chen's perspective on the world. Hiding the world under the sky and being a disciple with the sky is a real person. This may be the root of Lu Chen's avenue, but it seems that no one outsider can learn it. A tug of war, the tall Taoist figure has already taken away 40% of the water transport in the Luluo River. Lu Xian tutade, a native monk in the wild world plus us outsiders, the 14th realm great monk, seems a bit too much. In addition to Lu Xian himself, there is also the great ancestor Zhou Xian who has returned from the sky and rebelled against the Great Wall of Sword Qi. The old blind man who continued to help each other, Qin Lu, the sword repairman who was a dragon slayer, and Wu Shuangjiang, a military monk who only came here to travel. Of course there is also a hidden Beidasheng Juzhong. If there are no flaws in Lu Chen's deduction, it is very likely that there will be an additional 14th level sword repairman in the wild world. It is a brand new Zongyun, specially used by Tuyueshan to target Aliang and the left. Is the assassin of Tuo Yueshan, it must be one Heist key follower carefully left in the world. Which type of Qi trainer in the world can best kill the Ascended Realm Sword Repair? Very simple, it is pure sword repair in the 14th realm. What's more, in fact, there is actually a great monk of the 14th realm peak who has never set foot in the wild mountains and rivers for thousands of years. White Pond. This time Bai Zhe will choose to stand in the wild world without any suspense. Lu Chen stood up suddenly, sighed. Go, since you can't kill Fei Fei, please reserve some strength to do bigger things. Hao Su frowned and said, why? Qin Pingon clearly has completely dragged the Fei Fei. Leaving Yilua without a sword? Lu Chen didn't give an answer. He just smiled and turned around and punched a sect leader not far away, and then Lu Chen returned to the Lotus Dojo with an incarnation of mind. Hao Su hesitated for a moment, but in the end he didn't make a sword. After Lu Chen and Hao Su left, on the big branch beside them, a slender man appeared out of thin air. It was Bai Zhe with a lonely look. The Tuiyue mountain array opened in an instant, and the surrounding mountains and rivers were filled with water and mist. A long river of time lingering around this mountain for thousands of years was like a moat. Drag the monster monks in the Moon Mountain as if they were approaching the enemy without exception. They all looked at the foot of the mountain without turning their eyes. The clouds and mist billowed the sky and covered the sun. One person took the lead out of the long river of time, followed by Ning Yao and Lu Ji. Finally, Qi Tingji, criminal officer Hao Su. 10,000 years ago there were 3 criminals in the Great Wall of Sword Qi and Qin Qing all took the lead. 10,000 years later, 5 more sword repairmen from the Great Wall of Jianqi have joined together to visit this mountain. As a tribute to the wild world to attack the Great Wall of Jianqi for thousands of years. Outside the sky, a woman in white clothes twisting a star with at will, her figure gradually dissipated, and finally turned into a bright beam of light from the vast and endless emptiness, and went straight to the incomparably small barren world. At the foot of Tuiyue Mountain, the person in the middle, Qin Pingon, stepped on the long sword and walked at night. The sword hovered in the air, his right fingers were brought together and he passed slowly to the right. A golden light appeared in front of him. A long sword that is more powerful than the sky, from here to the sky to this world. Qin Pingon holds a sword in his left hand. At this moment, Qin Pingon is like the true sword-bearer 10,000 years ago, the earliest sword-bearer among the 5 highest in the ancient heavenly court. Sword of Coming Chapter 861. This chapter was uploaded late. P.S. There is another chapter update on 15th. Qin Pingon holds a sword in his left hand. There is a big mountain blocking the way. Previously on the side of Xiandan City, Qin Pingan's Taoist style did not use any swordsmanship. He chose to shake Gaoqing with his fists only to remind Bai Yujing that the 3 heads of teaching, both sides actually still have old accounts that have not been calculated. Later, Lu Chen drew a knowing picture with a cicada attached to the front line. Isn't it a courtesy, implying Qin Pingon that he wants to pass the sword on to a mountain successfully, and the long sword knight tour of the fairy rank is still not enough. Change 1. This is Qin Pingan's in that fairy hairpin city. He couldn't help but remember the scene when he was young. Because he never deliberately concealed his emotions, Lu Chen borrowed a 14 realm of Taoism, so he had to send it under the fence and inhabit Qin Ping's soul as if he saw a picture. The slowly spreading scroll of time reveals the scene of knowing the picture, hand-painted by Lu Chen later. No problem. After traveling to Bai Yujing, even the second son of Taoism, who is known as the true invincible, will not miss it. Thinking back that year on the way to travel far away from home for the first time, the young Qin Pingon wore straw sandals and held a hatchet, accustomed to making way for others to enter the mountains. There was a question and answer when confronting Gaoyue, who was later known as Zhou Xian. She asked Qin Pingan, what if there are mountains blocking the road? At that time, Qin Pingan's answer climbed over instead of taking a detour. She asked if there was a sword in her hand. Qin Pingan just said to start the mountain. Walk. That time, before Qin Pingan handed over the sword, when both sides uttered the 2 characters together. The long sword in the young man's hand trembled frantically. Like a lonely tibetan for thousands of years on the tallest branch in the world, it blasts to heaven and earth. There is Tuiyue Mountain in front of you, towering into the clouds. In the early years, this mountain was unable to be refined after being obtained by the great ancestors of the wild. In the end, it was only refined into a mid-refining natal thing, and Tuiyue Mountain facing Taiwan is all in harmony and has been standing in the world for more than 10,000 years. The wild great demon who sits on Tuiyue Mountain now is a man in yellow clothes standing on the top of the mountain. The culprit of the Taoist name, that is, the first mountain guard in Tuyue Mountain's history, was exactly the time when Master disappeared. He is responsible for guarding a world. As the new makeup and Liz Hen brother, the pioneer of the wild ancestor, the culprit is not well known. He rarely left Tuyue Mountain, and later he never appeared in Jiazizang and Haoran world. So that the whole barren world simply became the first disciple of the great ancestor no longer exists. The culprit was standing at the highest point of Tuyue Mountain at the moment, with his hands folded, overlooking the young hidden official who single-handed the sword, and then glanced at the divided sword repairers. Let them just take out the sword. This Ascension Realm Pinnacle Great Demon really didn't believe that the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Chi could chop off a famous hall. Unless these 4 sword repairmen are from the Great Wall of Sword Chi, they can cut more than 10,000 swords, and they must be successful in swordsmanship, and they can open the mountain every time. The culprit of the big demon has been in harmony with the mountain for more than 10,000 years. That's why I stayed simple and never showed up. That young Qin Pingon has only been a pure sword repairman for a few years? It's only a few years since Hedao half the Great Wall of Sword Chi. The culprit, the guardian of Tuyue Mountain in the past dynasties, only dealt with outside the mountain, and was responsible for secretly gathering the souls of the Dragon Lord and the Watch. In the questioning sword 10,000 years ago, Qin Qing paid the price of losing his life, flying sword duckweed. There is no record of that scene, that is, Tuyue Mountain and the Great Wall of Jianxi. There is no written record of the reasons why the 3 sword repairmen produced the sword, how the sword was produced and the final result. Otherwise it does not matter now. Which monk in the world is it a sword repairer? As long as he turns on this page of the old almanac, he will feel a billowing sword aura. Within tens of thousands of miles in the radius of Tuyue Mountain, the sky was turned upside down, the mountains and rivers were broken, and the sword chi was forcibly stirred into a place not suitable for cultivation. Tuyue Mountain was directly cut in half by Lord Long, and only then did the newcomers of Immortal Hairpin City come to the top and become the highest city in the wild. Observing the last sword in his lifetime, he chopped out the rudimentary form of the trailing river in the wild future generations. At the same time, Qin Qingdu smashed the road to ascend to the sky with a single sword. The greater consequence was that Qin Qingdu made the great ancestor of the wild, even after 10,000 years, still failed to enter the 15th realm and was only one step away. It ended up being a ridicule by the old blind man, maybe because of his lack of monastic qualifications. Long Jun lost his soul and 2 souls. Whether he was discussing matters in the Hall of Valor or the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Chi, Long Jun only showed his bleak image in a gray robe. Ahead is even more so Bai Ying, who is high above the withered bone throne by the great demon of the old throne, whose true identity is the body of the Yangshan, who is well conceived, just stepped on her feet. As for Liz Hen's predecessor, Jianxiu Guanzhao ended up worse than Long Jun. The veritable body died and disappeared. The real body was completely annihilated after the end of the questioning sword, and the soul was scattered across the world. Later it was searched by the guardian of Tuyue Mountain. After reaching the most critical soul, and then stitching together the remaining souls, there is now the new heavenly court armored person. Therefore the Great Wall of Sword Chi was divided into 2 by the wild ancestors, Qin Qingdu, Longjun Guanzhao, and the 3 swordsmen. In a sense it was actually a weird long-distance reunion. Qi Tingji took out a sword workshop standard long sword from his sleeve, and used it to hand out the first sword to pay homage to the old sword Immortal, as well as the 2 seniors who were 10,000 years ago, Longjun and Guanzhao. Ning Yao was innocent, holding one of the 4 fairy swords. After the criminal officer Hao Su sacrificed his destiny flying sword, within 100 li, it was like a moon mirror lying horizontally on the ground. The sky was full of frost and only Hao Su stood in it. Lu Ji couldn't bear the 2 swords of Nanming and the ease of use. Moreover, these 2 swords were not suitable for cutting mountains. Even if the blade was rolled up and the long sword broke, he had to stay at the end. The 2 Taoist swords of Nanming and Yi, Lu Ji stepped on a large formation of Nanming Tianqi that Taoists called the Abbot of Tianxin, and a herring was born with ease, taking the water transport out of thin air and taking out the long sword. The centipede is the high-quality legacy of a female monk in the Ascension realm of Baiyujing. In order to pursue more handing swords, Lu Ji had to endure the awkwardness in his heart and put it on his body, and his heart instantly felt a little acquainted, as if he was given a magical power. Lu Ji has already mastered the 2 superior methods of Baiyujing. After thinking about it again, she took out the autumn water and chiseled mountains that she had previously used in Baihua City, and then took out the mountains and trees and deliberately hovering at her hand, which was convenient for cutting off. When all the 8 swords in the box were taken out by Lu Ji, once she fully used it, it turned out to be a whole set of sword formations similar to the Dao sect sword Immortal. It was more than a combination of offensive and defensive, and it was simply a mobile world where the avenue revolved on its own. Like a Taoist saint who can take a Taoist temple to travel far between the world, a soldier and a monk can carry the entire battlefield ruins around. She nodded. She didn't make a mistake before, and Lu Chen's Taoism was really interesting. The monster cultivators of Tuyue Mountain, without exception, all have their heartstrings tense. Both sides of the hostel are only qualified to show their faces when they ascend to the realm. Whoever mixes will die. It's okay if Tuyueshan keeps it, but if you can't keep it, you can only wait to die. Qin Pingon suddenly clenched the long sword in his hand, and said silently in his heart, "Go with you to open the mountain. When you meet the fairy hairpin city, you will destroy the city, and when you meet Yiluo, you will tug of war. Then when you meet Tuyue Mountain, you must move the mountain." Qin Pingon showed a great picture. A sword cut the long river of time away. In addition, the 4 swords of light from Qi Tingji, Ningyao, Lu Ji and Haosu slashed the mountain. After one sword, the big demon prime culprit standing on the top of the mountain collapsed, but instantly merged into one, as if all those swords had failed and never landed on Tuyue Mountain. Those savage monster monks who had to watch from the wall had no time to applaud the culprit's means of reaching the sky. They found that in a mountain, there were countless sword chi in the sky like a rainbow, the mountain-top sword chi pouring like a waterfall, and the mountain-foot sword chi flowing back like a flood. Hiding, avoiding unavoidable, there are more than 100 monster sword repairers in an instant, and there are still some life-saving methods outside the fairyland, and within the Yupu realm, they were all strangled on the spot, all turned into parts and taken by Tuyueshan, the heaven and earth aura. Until this moment, there were several fairyland demon races who were here as guests. After realizing, they understood why Tuo Yushan's direct disciple had long disappeared. It turned out that the culprit seemed to have expected such a sword. The calamity brought by Zhou Wenjian. Only after the tens of swords, except for the culprit at the top of Tuyue Mountain, and a handful of immortal realms, there were no surviving monks in the mountain. The culprit who had been slashed by the young hidden officer's body again and again stood still. This ascending peak great demon was born and died a dozen times in the detached posture of a person without boundaries. Tuyue Mountain is like a cultivator who has accumulated thousands of years of Taoism, and can only be moved to the top of the mountain after being opened thousands of times in succession. If the culprit is temporarily invincible, then the sword bearer in the culprit's field of vision is a higher posture of invincibility with a sword. The culprit glanced at the golden eyes of the young hidden official intentionally or unintentionally. Lu Chen stood in the Lotus Dojo, widened his eyes, looked around and shouted in his heart, "Hey, is that one really you?" Shut out Lu Chen, so hard, cheeky and gloomy around Qin Pingon. "Just wait until I have a question with you today. Is it just me, Lu Chen, a dream? Or are all sentient beings a man-made dream for you? Don't stop talking, the trail can be asserted, you must have heard it. If tens of thousands of years are a dream of one person, not only is Qin Pingon the one, but in fact all living beings in the human world are that one for thousands of years. So what is the meaning of my Lu Chen cultivation? Outside of waking up from a dream, no human race can climb to the sky, and there has never been a collapse of heaven?" Qin Pingan's disciple of the mountain, Pei Qian, only learned after the fact that the tall building in the old chef's heart was by Yujing, who was imitated from the Qingming world. On the long journey away from the lotus flower-blessed land, Qin Pingon accidentally asked the 4 people in the picture scroll a question, but Zhu Lian insisted to the end, saying that even if one person killed could save the world, he would still not be saved, because he was worried that he was the one. At that time Zhu Lian took Pei Xiang, the lord of the Fox country, back to Luopa Mountain. He had been on a high of Chiduan Mountain. Zhu Lian said that waking up from a dream was a cliff jumping. Said that I am more and more uncertain whether I and the world are real. Saying that Pei Xiang couldn't give the answer, Zhu Lian finally raised his finger to the distance and said that someone he had trusted must tell him the answer before he would believe it. The reason why Lu Chen was willing to lend Qin Pingon a Dao Fa was that he really hoped that the rudiment of that one could help himself. No matter what the answer is, as long as he is willing to speak yes or no, Lu Chen has his own means. No matter which answer he gets, he can make the most important dream awakening. Unfortunately, he ignored Lu Chen's inquiry. Seems that Qin Pingon doesn't have that one at all. Lu Chen was a little sad, so you look down on a 14th level monk. Or is it that Qin Pingon suppressed that one? Between Dongbaoping's Hao and Baijiluzu, the sea bridge that once spanned the two continents has been torn down. Otherwise it will confuse the luck of the two continents. A young Taoist boy and a tall old Taoist left the Longzhou boundary and walked together on the sea. Lao Guanzhu glanced back at the land of Ao Pingzhou. This embroidered tiger can also be regarded as a veritable Confucian meritorious effort to raise the sky and the sea. Rather than let Zhou succeed, it is better for him to accept his fate in Qin Pingon. Daozu smiled and said, he will claim this one. As a caged bird, he chooses to circulate in the cage for 1 year, that is, he will not get out of the cage for 1 year. If he can deal with it for 10,000 years, he will be a cage for 10,000 years. The old master smiled and said, dealing? I have been dealing with me for a long time. It's like letting the contending for oneness to rotate in situ, and follow Qin Pingon to hit the wall together in the cage. Cui Huang and Qi Jingchun ascended to the sky by careful consideration, and entered the ruins of the old heavenly court. It was an invitation to enter the urn. Never thought that there is a different kind of cage in this world waiting for thoroughness. When Xing is in the same line, 3 senior brothers. They are ruthless to themselves. How so? Probably all 3 of them have a hope for this world. It is not that the world is beautiful enough to give people hope, but it is precisely because the world is not good enough and there is no small matter in the world that we need to give more hope to the world. Lao Guanzhu curiously asked. Zhou instructed the culprit to stand still with 2 Yueshans stupidly, and let Qin Ping's sword chop 10,000 times, just for the sake of the sword handing to break the divinity that flowed away? Dao ancestor nodded. To deal with smart people, often only stupid methods are useful. As long as Qin Pingon thinks he is a sword repairman, he is destined to be unable to bypass the Tuyue mountain. The master of the old viewer stretched out his hand to pick up a handful of water, and gently shook his palm, so as to measure the weight of the rituals and rules of the saint and Hauran. In this way Qin Pingon might be the first to become the target of public criticism than Yudou. Wu Shuangjiang once sent a message to Yudou, the second son of Taoism, that if a monarch does not cultivate morality, the way to die is also. Because the people in the boat are all enemy nations. The old master sneered. The ancient meritorious saints made great contributions to the greatest transformation, taking the world and gaining it with the hearts of the people. Today's Zhou wants to take the world from the sky and the lives of people. Dao Zu smiled and asked, you said that Hauran Jiaxing what was thinking the moment he crossed the Great Wall of Sword Qi? The old Guanzhu replied casually, it's about the fact that the fate is reversed, not the world's tolerance. This scholar has a higher heart than the sky, so there is only one way to go to the sky. I guess the Sword Qi not long after the Great Wall, Zhou must have looked up at the sky, sure that that high place is where his heart is. The old Guanzhu released his hand and released the water in his palm back into the sea. If Qin Ping's really moved the mountain and the sword was the culprit, would the city be engraved? What characters? Plus Qin Shi engraved earlier. If he can still cut another head of the Ascendant Realm, he will get his name together by this kid. Only by this matter in the next 10,000 years, then his name Qin Pingon will probably be bigger than Yudou. It's not all selfishness, it will help the relics of the Great Wall of Jianqi, and will be mentioned more and longer by later generations of Qi practitioners. There is a saying circulating on the mountain. To be completely forgotten by the world is another death after death. Daozu shook his head. If you really want to engrave, it will only be the word ping of that duckweed. The master nodded. Daozu suddenly said, stop talking about it a few times and it won't hurt to speak while standing. The old view master smiled freely. Golden Arch Bridge. Wan Xiu looked at the far-flung sword light. The vast sky beyond, stars as small as mustard seeds on the ground, countless, some densely clustered together, forming a bright and brilliant galaxy. That imposing sword light travels through it, like a fire in a stone, white horses passing through the gap, and the speed of the sword light is better than the long river of time. Zhou squinted and overlooked the world. Li Zhen leaned on the railing and blinked. Hey, why did the river change its course? Is this breaking the world? Zhou smiled and said, it's not a good habit to gloat in front of others. Li Zhen turned his head and glanced at it carefully. Even if he knows his roots, he still has to take another look. He can't help but admire the Tongtian Laohu, who has eaten the words of Master Qian Lu Fian. Li Zhen retracted his gaze and looked beyond the golden arch bridge. In the eyes of high-level gods, the long river of time is like the mountains and rivers in the eyes of Wang Qishu. Except for the golden body of the gods, it is everywhere. In the eyes of the supreme god, it was another strange scene, like a wall-less house made up of countless small ones, moved by billions of things seemingly orderly but in fact disorderly. However, the 5 to 4 of the highest among the heavenly co-lords, knowing that in the chaos of heaven and earth, there is actually the only order hidden. 10,000 years ago, whether or not he was among the ancient high-ranking gods depends on whether he could see the inseparable thing with his own eyes. And each short and orderly trajectory, similar to a riverbed of a certain tributary of the long river of time, is a magical power, which is the so-called Taoism of the later generations of human qi practitioners. In several worlds, the monks who later climbed the mountain, every kind of Taoism fairy tactics recorded in books or memorized in their hearts, follow this heavenly principle. Every text in the book, every heartfelt speech is one by one. Precise anchor point trying to shape a unique existence. But in the eyes of the supreme god, this action of the cultivator in the world is still just a last resort to carve the boat and ask for the sword. The boat walks with the water and drags the anchors thrown into the water to move slowly. Therefore it is difficult to prove immortality and cannot be with the world. Life. Within the long river of time, there is no hovering boat completely moored. So naturally there is nothing right and wrong. Qi Jingchun studied at the Lizhu Dongtian Academy in the past years. What he really asked for was this matter and this thing. Zhou seems to be talking to himself. The so-called confluence of the 3 religions trying to establish a religion and proclaim the ancestor? That would be too small for Qi Jingchun's ambition. But unfortunately, it is contrary to my path and is not a fellow man. What Qi Jingchun really asks is that he hopes that a small group of monks will emerge first, and then a large group of monks will emerge on the earth, as if to make a new climb to the sky so that both the mountain and the world are worry-free, and those who climb the mountain will become a distant traveler. Beyond the sky really pursue the road. And this is in line with senior brother Cui Yang's, pursuing a larger chessboard. It's just that the first one that started to operate has been in the hands of the old heavenly co-master. The thing that Dao ancestors were looking for was this one, and he finally named him Dao. I have looked for it and even saw it with my own eyes, but still can't catch it with Daoist Taoism, and it is fleeting. Taoist ancestors have seen it 3 times in total, and even saw the earliest movement of the great Dao brought by the one brought, so Taoism has the language of 3 lives and all things. It was a scene beyond the imagination of the monks. It was both magnificent and terrifying, simple and mysterious, and it was impossible to describe its appearance or describe its beauty. Beyond all existence, size and reality, all the words in the world have become obstacles to explode. Whether it is the Taoist or the Buddha, in order to preach to the descendants and tell the origin, it is necessary to neither write nor explain its meaning in detail, because the more words there are, the further away from it. Zhou turned his head and glanced at the woman standing on the railing. Following her sight, she saw the wild world, the white flower city that was completely reduced to ruins. Li Zhen said in amazement, "As expected, I am the hermit Sama I admire the most. When crossing the border there is no grass." The sect master whose god was forcibly dispelled not only fell from the immortal realm, but also teetered from the Jade Pu realm. This kind of damage to the Dao's fundamental damage was not an easy thing to kill Dao Xing for decades and hundreds of years. It took the great risk of being kept waiting for the rabbit and sneaked back to the top of Zongmen Mountain. After roughly determined that Qi Tingji and Lu Ji had traveled far, it gathered the old department, but there were only some unusable shrimp soldiers and crabs left, and it went shopping. Several treasuries finally sat on the steps at the gate of the mountain, feeling like a knife, and most of their own sect title could not be kept. These sword immortals from the Great Wall of Sword Qi were more ruthless than each. Chopping melons and vegetables is cruel enough, I never wanted to search more cruelly. I only heard that the young hidden official was able to stand in front of the old thrones on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Jianqi in the past. But I never heard that Qi Tingji and Lu Ji are so greedy for money. Another mountain city, the ruins of the ancient battlefield, encountered Ning Yao's sword, Qi Tingji's soul-raising flags, and thunder and lightning bamboo sea. A female ghost in the Golden Core realm who had escaped 2 catastrophes was not killed by the sword. And Qi Tingji was not paid into the banner, she was suddenly surprised, and only when she surveyed the altar room she unexpectedly gave birth to a natal flying sword. I saw the embryo of a pocket flying sword in the Naden room, shaped like a green bamboo, like a bamboo with beautiful appearance, tall, and there are faint thundercloud patterns on the bamboo joints. It is as if one drink and one peck there is definite determination. Suddenly she knelt on the ground, and the place where Ning Yao was handing the sword in the air and the top of the mountain where Qi Tingji stood, each knocked 9 sturdy heads. In the wild world this has been regarded as a great gift of apprenticeship. This female ghost with the pseudonym Coriander, when she bowed her head and knelt down, she thought of words in her heart, and made 2 wishes with her sincerely. When Na Ning Yao made the sword the first time, Coriander had actually planned to kill her by pulling her neck and standing there, but for some reason those sword chi seemed to have been ordered by the master and they all bypassed her. As for revenge? In this lawless battlefield site, there are fierce fights almost every day and each other as enemies, even if it is the hundreds of ghosts and spirits under her command, who doesn't have hatred with her. Daoist Xingshan, a line of sword repairs passed through the border, still safe and sound. In the study, Shanjun Biwu took out a forbidden geomancy map of the barren world, which was drawn by Biwu privately. The various sects, mountains, waters and luck will light up different degrees of brilliance on the situation map. Biwu was surprised to find that the White Flower City, the Cloud Pattern Dynasty, and the Fairy Hairpin City all appeared dim to varying degrees on the map. The White Flower City was almost reduced to darkness, and the Fairy Hairpin City was divided into 2. The friend of the Taoist named Slim Mei is now traveling through the Fairy Hairpin City, not knowing if there will be an accident. In Biwas Mountain Shrine, nearly 20 natal lamps are secretly enshrined. This is a deadly friendship on the mountain. It can be seen that Shanjun Biwu has a good reputation in this wild world. Many monks of the demon race can't trust their own Zhongmen Zushatang, but they can trust the Green Mountains and Green Wives. This is why Biwu was so nervous when he faced Ning Yao, who was climbing before. He was really afraid that Ning Yao would not agree with him, so he cut off the ban on the landscape of the temple, and then chopped the temple and the natal lamps together. Once the ancestral temple is broken by Ning Yao, those natal lamps that are closely linked to the luck of the Daoist mountain will definitely be revealed together. Such a series of military exploits, 1 immortal, 9 jade pure realm, and the rest are at least earth immortals. Once all the natal lamps are destroyed they will at least fall by 1 level. Together they are almost comparable to killing an ascended monk. Credit for it. It stands to reason that the summer palace of the Great Wall of Jianqi should have heard of this matter and it has already been recorded. Ning Jianxian may not know this, but Qin Pingon, who has served as a hermit for many years, absolutely knows the inside story. So Biwu couldn't understand why this young hidden official who knows the most careful calculations would pass by here, but was willing to let Qingshan go? Biwu thought for a while, walked out of the house, went elsewhere and stood under an old plum tree. Fortunately, the natal lamp in the temple was intact, and the tree in front of him had never withered. This means that the old Thin may not only survived, but he didn't seem to be damaged. Without a breeze, the old tree swayed and then the figure of a monk emerged. Biwu clasped his fists and smiled, "Skinny Taoist friend." It was on the side of the Dragon Gate of Xinjiang City. The old monk with the name of Thin Mei gasped for breath and made no secret of his panic and said with lingering fear, standing on the top of the Longmen archway, the young hermit extended his finger. It was just a pointer. The second seat of Immortal Hairpin City next to me was exploded on the spot, and there was nothing left of Jin Dan and Yuaning. That was a Jade Pu realm monk and there was no way to fight back. Too late to show. Biwu had some doubts. The old monk waved his hand, "Don't ask anything." Shanjun nodded with a smile. Then the old monk solemnly said, "Mr. Biwu Mountain, I have to take a long trip immediately. Things are rushed. I'm afraid I need to borrow that train with you temporarily." Biwu didn't ask why, he lent his car to a friend without hesitation. With a wave of his hand, that celestial vehicle immediately swept from the backyard of the temple, the size of a palm, the flames rising, the electric light intertwined. Biwu with a light push. At the same time he taught a friend how to drive a train with his heart. The old monk smiled bitterly and said, "Mr. Biwu Mountain, if there is an accident, even if I take my life, I can't afford it." Biwu smiled and said, "This trip to Tuya Mountain is really going to be an accident. Taoist Shomei only cares about the property and life, and there is no need to talk about compensation. Just be Qingshan and this treasure, the fate is exhausted." The old monk stomped his foot and didn't say any polite words. He drove the train and hurried to Tuyue Mountain. According to the agreement with the young hermit, he wanted to give a message to Fei Ran. Shanjun Biwu twisted the rosary all the way, walked to the Wunshu monastery, and respected the 3 sticks of incense sincerely. The capital of the Moor dynasty. Yi Bao, the great cultivator of the Ascension realm, returned to Jade City with the sword of a woman Wu Fu. A palace treasure house, terrible sea. There is also a large pool of money treasury of the princes of the capital of the Moor dynasty, with a high position in the temple, and the treasures accumulated by the family for generations of monks have been looted. Some old money that has never been moved from the bottom of the box is probably almost like Moor. The dynasties are of the same age, and I never thought that the 2 sword immortals who hadn't been ignored by the emperors of the past dynasties, even gave the Great Wall of Jinchi so immortal and did not change their lives with the old and new thrones, they were hollowed out. It really doesn't work if you don't give it, and a little hesitation is just a sort of light. At this time in the capital court hall, many old monks who had no time to put on official robes beat their chests and feet, and some female monks with prominent official positions were crying. Both sides hoped that the emperor would help to ask for justice. Yi Waterfall, who had lost a sword formation, became more and more upset. In this jade version of the city, he was the emperor who was most injured. Bai Ren's face was pale, her lips trembling, her hands clenched fists. Before, in the corridor of the high-rise building where the sword formation was, Qin Pingon, who was dressed up by the man, stuck her finger on her forehead and threw directly out of the capital. From the end, Wu Fu fell into the mountain territory. She glanced at a girl who had hooked up with Yi Pu privately, and one step was a blow to the head, and then several punches to kill the golden core fox charm. White Blade waved her sleeves to disperse the scent of foxes, turned her head and looked at the unprepared guys coldly. She gave a casual excuse. Dare to collude with foreign sword repairers, try to plot to usurp the throne, something that does not know whether it is life or death. Sitting on the dragon chair, Yi Waterfall nodded. Then all family properties will be confiscated. It's a point to be able to make up for it. Juquanzong. The sovereign Daohao Linglaze is an old veteran fairyland monk. The old sovereign and Mi Ji, the master of Yupu, left the mountain together, and Yu Feng came to the wine shop. The shopkeeper handed over the little summer money left by Lu Ji, and the old sword fairy Qi Tingji's Guyu money. Lingla smiled and accepted 2 fairy money. Mi Ji was anxious and hesitated to say something, as if he did not agree with the old master accepting the immortal money. Ling Glaze smiled and said, "Don't get too thin for porridge. Mosquito legs are also meat, not to mention a grain of rain money." Mi Ji sits at a table. Although she is not good at fighting, she really doesn't care about the so-called tragic situation at the wine shop. She's not a little fussy. In the wild world, this kind of scene is nothing. She took it out of her sleeve. A pot of self-brewed wine, took a sip of the immortal brew and asked in his heart. Juquanzong has collected the 2 gods' money left by Qi Tingji and Lu Ji deliberately. Will Tua Yueshan be held accountable afterwards? Deliberately taking 2 gods' money to make things difficult for us? To be smaller, it is because Jiuquan sect is not helpful and unable to stop them, and when it is bigger, it is to be in harmony with the remnants of the Great Wall of Jianqi and can afford it? Linglaze still had a completely indifferent look and smiled. Since ancient times, gold and silver have not pressed hands and the gods have not bitten people. We have to believe in the mind of the sword fairy. Mi Ji frowned. We were originally Xiaoman Xiaopai. I don't believe in these swordsmen who go deep into the wild hinterland just to drink a few pots of wine in our Jiuquan sect. The old sect master kicked away the broken limbs beside his foot, sat on the bench and groaned for a moment. It depends on whether there is any major sect that has suffered in addition to us. If there is, then our Jiuquan sect, there's nothing wrong with it. If there isn't, it's hanging around. I just hope that there is a big monk and big sect that can help Jiuquan sect share the worries. The old sect master poured himself a bowl of wine. Ha laughed. How can you behave like this? It's too unkind. Soon there was a letter from the flying sword from the sect. The old fairy twisted the flying sword and sighed. The jade city of Yi Waterfall was looted by Qi Tingji and Lu Ji. As for the fairy hair city, I was struck by a hidden official who turned into a Daoist and was stunned. As for whether it was Qin Pingon or not, there is no definitive statement. The traveling monks who fled from Xianzhan city are conclusive. That young hermit, the patriarch hall of Xiandan city. Forget it, there is no patriarch hall anymore, it seems to be broken. It must be Qin Pingon. It's just that I don't know if this hidden official has passed by here before. Hearing this, Miji asked in confusion, why must it be him? The old immortal shook the bowl of wine and said, only the hidden officials of the Great Wall of Sword Qi can mobilize Qi Tingji, Ning Yao and Lu Ji, and travel with him to hand the sword to the wilderness. Miji suddenly said, that's the truth. The old fairy stroked his beard and smiled. Now it seems that our Jiuquan sect still has a lot of face. Liang Qi Tingji Lu Ji. If we can add another last hermit Qin Pingon? Miji drank the wine, turned her head and glanced at the extremely deserted street outside. I don't know if I can see you again. Miji has heard of this Xianxia with the same surname for a long time and has never seen him. Ling Glaze glanced at the beautiful palm rhythm monk and said jokingly, seeing what Nami is doing, your slender waist can't stand his sword. Miji took a sip of wine and laughed. I only heard that there are tired cows but there are no bad fields. The old fairy suddenly realized that he touched his Li's nose, and sighed for no reason. Suddenly I miss Alien's words on the wine table. Fairy Hairpin City. The deputy city lord Imu didn't know why he could avoid one death, but his soul was detained by that person with a secret technique, causing the fairy Imu to fall into Yupu. The two sections of Gaoqing, originally known as the highest city in the world, are now blocked by two landscape charms, separated by hundreds of miles from each other, and cannot be joined together again. What's more, even if Inlu had the ability, he definitely did not dare to restore Xianyan City to its original appearance. The new city lord, who was about to be frightened, felt that even though he was in the same 14th realm, he was just as silly as he was facing that one. Luyuo waters. Concubine Fei couldn't care about the avenue's damage. With that breath, she immediately shrank the mountains and rivers and came to a tree. She endured the discomfort in her heart. She was a little bit twisted. After learning from the mountain girl, she gave a blessing and said respectfully, Fei the concubine has met Mr. Bai. Even if she had been discussing matters in the Hall of Valor before, facing the high thrones of Tuo Yushan Dezu and Wenhai Zhoumi, she had never been so pretentious. Bai Zhe stepped forward, landed on the ground, stood beside Fei Fei, shook his head, just call her by name. Bai Zhe turned his head and looked at Fei Fei, a pair of scarlet eyes that seemed to be filled with hope. Bai Zhe asked, don't you guys hold hate? Fei Fei can be described as bleak at the moment. She grinned, lifted the back of her hand to wipe the blood on her face, shook her head and said, I dare not have it and there will be no. Bai Zhe moved slowly, Fei Fei immediately followed, and did not dare to walk side by side with the biggest traitor in the wild world. She was half a figure behind. The opportunity that originally belonged to Yangji will be given to you together. Bai Zhe said in his heart, but you have to promise something. If you and Yangji will reunite in the future, don't think about killing Yangji, let her make a living, let her walk a road. How? Can it be done? Fei Fei thought for a while and nodded. Since Mr. Bai has said, Fei Fei can certainly do it. In fact, there are two great disputes between Fei Fei and Yangji. One is competing for wild water transportation, and the other is more concealed, because Fei Fei's avenue is rooted in a dispute between water and fire. Therefore, in Bai Zhe's view, Fei Fei's avenue is much higher than Yangji. Bai Zhe said, then remember it, I will just say the Taoju again. It is a little practice trick that I have worked out without having to do anything in the early years. It is about 4,000 words. The Great Avenue, the Sun and the Moon, the Yin and Yang, the 6 lines of gossip. 1,000 words, the body of the soul only in Canli. After replenishing Xiantian, the mud water golden pill, regulating the heat, the world is endless. Yang, fire and Yin talisman are 2 secret agreements, capturing the sun and moon in a year. The star Dolua sets out the road and the outline, and the heart is the same as the horse. Water nourishes spirit smoke, fire nourishes spirit spring. Liju first emerges water, volcano burns out by itself. Zuan's hiss lightning bolt thunder Guangfei, rewinding the yellow river around Xuanji. White snow and yellow buds match Canli, refine the universe in the sun and moon pot. Bai Zhe only said the Daoju once. As an old throne demon, it is of course not difficult to remember the words. What is commendable is that the Fei concubine had a clear understanding during the recitation, so that she ushered in Fuyuo. The resonating vision of the world of broken water transport. Dao Xianwei, the art of longevity, it is difficult to know without the teacher's guidance. At the height of Fei Fei, the great monk on the top of the mountain, in fact, it is difficult for anyone to give advice on his own practice. Bai Zhe is an exception. Fei Fei once again sincerely gave a blessing and thanked Bai Zhe, who has the grace of preaching. Bai Zhe just remained silent. Concubine Fei was anxious. Mr. Bai, is it possible that our barren world has fallen into such a field, and can only be run around by a few sword celestials? Bai Zhe shook his head and said, Tua Mountain needs to besieged and killed Aoliang in the left and right, and Qin Pingon is not a concern for the time being. With the help of the 3 mountain talisman, they have appeared in the wild hinterland, which is probably a big accident. The 2 top combat powers in the world, Tuyue Mountain and Zhongtu Confucian Temple, have their own arrangements, and both sides perform their duties. During the period except for the real fire dragon, they went out to the remote gate alone to perform the 2 methods of water and fire, and the rest of the world's mountain monks, they didn't make any moves based on their preferences alone. Just like Tingji, there are Beta Shengjing Juzhong, the big-end woman Valkyrie Pei Cup, and Huayin, one of the 10 people in Middle-earth, and the Ascension realm from the demon race, Taishishin Gua Uding. In addition, there are also Lu Xia from Tianyao Township and Fuyao and Songqian from Luxiazu, the female fairy Songqian, who did not do anything extra, but followed the established agenda of the Confucian Temple, and followed the rules and regulations. The cultivators of the fairyland outside the world no longer dared to advocate without permission, because there is a lesson from the past, and the fairy is so cautious, let alone the cultivator of the jade. Fei Fei asked cautiously, Can Mr. Bai go further? Is it possible to join the Dao Wilderness, one of the 15th realms in the legend? It's a pity that Bai Zhe turned a deaf ear and didn't give the answer that Fei Fei wanted. Fei Fei did not ask much. Bai Zhe was silent for a moment and laughed at himself. Don't think that there is one more me what the wild world can really do. Fei Fei said, Mr. Bai only needs to be in his hometown. In her opinion, there are only 3 monks in the world who have the most hope to become a brand new 15th realm. The saints of rituals for the Hauran world. The head teacher Bai Yujing, who was missing. Then there is this Bai Zhe who has returned to the wild world next to him. A smile suddenly appeared in Bai Zhe. Back then he took the maid Qing Ying to travel to Aquarius Island. Someone once teased him, of course it was a harmless joke. The fox swims with me and I must be evil. At that time Bai Zhe replied, The snow is vast and the caged bird is flying high. Concubine Fei was shocked. She immediately turned her head to look in the direction of Tuyue Mountain. She could not see the outline of the mountain with exhaustive eyesight. It was just that the atmosphere that affected the whole world made Fei Fei feel a sense of suffocation of being affected by the pond fish. Mr. Bai, this is? Bai Zhe's footsteps were a little heavier and his expression was indifferent, and he said to Fei Fei to break the secret. Someone is opening the mountain with the sword. After a while, only Qin Pingon had already handed out 3,000 swords, which meant that the culprit had died 3,000 times. Bai Zhe didn't seem to care about Tuyue Mountain's safety. Suddenly raised his head and looked at the bright moon that had been centered in the air. The 5 sword repairmen plus 1 Lu Xian had to drag the moon beyond moving the mountain. This is not surprising. In the previous criminal officer House's ascension to the bright moon, Bai Zhe had already felt in it. The bright moon seemed to be the place for the little girl to cultivate. But what surprised Bai Zhe was that Qin Pingon seemed determined to be alone. He could move the mountain with his sword, and cut the culprit of the great demon at the peak of the ascent. Then there are Ning Yao, Qi Tingji, Lu Ji and the criminal officer Haosu, who are about to jointly use the sword to drag the moon. It is obviously a temporary change of mind, not the bright moon Haosu walked through. When Ning Yao left, he glanced at the earth. Qin Pingon raised his head and looked at her at a distance, and then handed out a sword towards Tuyueshan. It seems to be saying that the fact of holding a sword in the 14th realm now is definitely not more difficult than practicing 1,000,000 boxing in his youth. Bai Zhe laughed blithely. Did he show up to stop him even if he took this questioning sword?